It's 1:30, everyone, so I'd like to call the December 11th Board of Directors meeting to order. First, I do the land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we're conducting this meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Hoopaches and Shuswap First Nations, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do so. We also have directors calling in from other territories, and I'd like to also acknowledge those nations and express our gratitude and our respect. Notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube and to the Regional District website. So Chair Jack is not able to be here in person, so I will be chairing the meetings today, but he is online, which we appreciate. So we'll start with introductions. My name is Debbie Haggard. I'm a counselor for the City of Port Alberni and the Vice Chair for the Regional District Board. So we'll go this way now.
Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Sayama. I'm the CAO for the ACRD.
Fred Boyko, Covert Director. Thank you.
Afternoon, Kirsten Johnson, Director for the Toquat Nation.
Harley Wiley, alternate for Beaver Creek.
And just so everybody that is watching on live stream or YouTube, Director Wiley is the alternate director for Beaver Creek. He is in attendance just to see what we're all about and get the feel of it, but he won't be talking or making any motions. Thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mariah Coots for the Hutchupasa Tribe Government. Kleko Chu.
Susan Roth. I'm the director for Beaver Creek. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Sparrow, Regional Director for Cherry Creek.
Hello, Aklama Penikote. I'm the Electoral Area Director for Sprout Lake.
Good afternoon, Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services. Good afternoon, Terry Fong, Chief Financial Officer.
And Alex Dyer, Manager of Planning. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'll be calling out to our directors and staff that are online. Director Beckett, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bob Beckett, Director for Area A, Bamfield.
Thank you. Director Steer.
Yes, good afternoon. Tom Steer, Appointed Director, District of Tofino.
Director Jack.
Good afternoon. Oklama Sayachat, Hishtuk Shetla Ho'et. I'm John Jack. I'm the Director for Ho'et and the Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McEwen.
Good afternoon, Marilyn McEwen, Mayor of Ucluelet.
Thank you. Director Siga.
Veda Sega, Director for Area C, Long Beach.
Thank you. Director Minions.
Good afternoon, Shari Minions, Mayor for the City of Port Alberni.
Okay, we have some staff online, so I'll be calling on them to introduce themselves. Mr. Erg.
Good afternoon, Mike Erg. I'm General Manager of Planning and Development.
Charlie, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Charlie Stewart, Regional Fire Services Manager.
And Eddie, did you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Eddie Kunderman, Operations Manager.
Great, thank you, everyone. We got a big crowd here today. So first, we have approval of the agenda. Is there any additions from directors? Seeing none, we do have an addition. We have a letter correspondence from the Huu-ay-aht First Nations requesting a letter of support for a grant application to support a food security initiative. So I'll place that under correspondence for action. Is there any other additions, Heather?
Nothing else.
Thank you. Could I get a motion from to approve the agenda as amended with the late item? Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Coots. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Any declarations or conflicts of interest? Director Jack.
I don't have a conflict, but I'm going to have to leave for a meeting at 2:00. It looks like Monoth leaders are meeting with the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans federally, so I'm going to have to jump into that. I'll be back hopefully before 3.
That's awesome. Thank you for letting me know. Next on the agenda is adoption of minutes. We have the minutes from the Board of Directors meeting held on November 27th, 2024. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I motion that the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on November 27th, 2024 be adopted? Moved by Director Johnson, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is the minutes from the West Coast Committee held on December 4th, 2024. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I motion that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on December 4th, 2024 be received? Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Then we have petitions, delegations, and presentations. We have Jenna Hildebrand and Tiana Lewis from Macola Development Services and Andrew Scallon-Dickey, manager from Turner Great, regarding presentation on the ACRD interim housing needs reports. So great. Nice to have you here today. That was quite an extensive report and it has some good information in it. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say today. So please go ahead. If you have a PowerPoint, you can share the screen.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Perfect. I'll just get everything loaded here. One sec. All right. Can I get a nod if that's working okay?
We can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much for having us on the agenda today. I know it's probably a packed one with it being the end of the year, so we appreciate the time today. For our agenda today, we're going to go over a little bit of a brief overview of who's working on the project, our consultant team. We'll go over kind of the project descriptions, the main kind of goals and objectives of the project. Andrew will speak to the interim report requirement projections, and then we'll have some time for some questions and discussion. So to begin, my name is Jenna Hildebrand. I work with Macola Development Services. We are a professional consulting firm that has planners, development consultants, project managers, and nonprofit housing experts. We have been working in the kind of affordable housing sector for over 30 years. We've had partnerships with multiple levels of government, nonprofit organizations, Indigenous communities, and some relationships with the private sector as well. We're governed by an Indigenous board of directors, which is really important for our organization as we do a lot of work with urban Indigenous nonprofits and First Nations across the province. And I'm joining today from the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I work as part of our Lower Mainland team in Vancouver. And I'll pass it off to Andrew to do a quick intro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Scallon-Dickey. I am the manager of our planning division at Turner Drake and Partners. Turner Drake is first and foremost a real estate consultancy with a variety of services, which include planning, more so related to data and planning. And so we partnered on many projects with Macola, even if really our headquarters and a big portion of our services are in Atlantic Canada. I'm reaching you from Halifax, Kjipuktuk, which is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Perfect. Okay, so now I'll just touch on some of the project overview. What is the interim housing needs report? So a little bit of background. In June, the province updated their legislative requirements for housing needs reports. So I know folks have probably seen housing needs reports over the past few years, but this time there are some new requirements, and that is to complete an interim housing needs report, and that needs to be done by the end of this year. So in terms of what those new reporting requirements are, we need to have the number of housing units required to meet current and anticipated demand or need for the next 5 and 20 years. We need to include a statement about the need for housing in close proximity to transportation infrastructure that supports walking, cycling, public transit, or other alternate modes of transportation. And we need to include a description of the actions that have been taken by local government since receiving the most recent housing needs report. So what has been done since the last report to address some of those calculations or those needs and demands that were highlighted in that last report. So regional districts are included in this in the requirements, and so we need to have these interim housing needs reports for each of the EAs. So in terms of this project, our goals, kind of 3 main project goals: meet new provincial requirements. Those are those new ones I just spoke to. we wanted to include some recommendations on current context and population growth. That will be largely a part of the phase 2 project, which I'll speak to in the next couple of slides. And then again, just reviewing those Bill 44 requirements, making sure that we are hitting all those legislative requirements through these reports. And just so everyone knows, in terms of this, the scope of this project, it is just for the participating electoral areas. I know there's obviously other municipalities and nations that are part of the ACRD, but the specific scope of this project was just the EAs. So I know that some of the interim housing needs reports have been completed separately to this project. So yeah, just a good thing to note for the interim report that you would have received. In terms of our project approach, we are doing kind of a two-phase project approach. So for phase 1, we started our work in July and we're wrapping up this month. You'll notice the deliverable as part of your staff kind of package is that interim housing needs reports, and one for each electoral area is included as an appendix. And again, in these, they have the 5 and 20-year housing projections, that transportation statement, and a description of actions taken since the last housing needs report. And then in terms of phase 2, this will be a much more comprehensive update. We'll be doing some community engagement, building on the 2021 needs reports. You'll have all the required report content for the housing needs report, just not the interim requirements, but will be a fulsome report. There'll be recommendations around current and context and population growth. And the deliverables that you can expect from phase 2 for the EA report will be a comprehensive housing data analysis and engagement summary report. There'll be a regional summary report and individual electoral area summary reports as well. And I'll pass it off to Andrew to do the interim report requirement projections.
All right, thanks, Jenna. And so a considerable portion of these new interim requirements is this conversation or this determination of housing demand across the electoral areas and the municipalities of the ACRD. Specifically, what I'll be speaking to, as Jenna alluded to, only the electoral areas. That said, so new interim reporting requirements, as I've mentioned and Jenna mentioned, involve estimating demand for housing units that might exist over the next 5 and 20 years. This methodology was actually introduced by the province in June 2024 and is prescribed to account for 3 key factors, one of which is current demand. So what might we need immediately for housing based off of shortages that may exist, projected demand, so how might growth impact the demand for housing, and then an element known as the demand buffer, which is the additional units required to improve affordability and restore balance to the housing market. This element is important to note as it is involved in the calculations, but for the electoral areas, it is actually excluded. So just for reference for the next few slides, it is not included in those results. What's important to note is that the methodology, as it is prescribed, is a broad standardized approach that is intended to be applied to all municipalities and electoral areas of BC as equally as possible. And so this means that all communities generally use the same broadly available data. Next slide. So what does that mean for the electoral areas of the ACRD? Well, by 2041, the total housing demand is projected to reach about 1,228 units. Although we are in 2024, the 20-year projection actually uses 2021 as the base year. And this reflects the period with the highest quality and highest availability of data, tied very much so to the last census period. A key thing to note as part of these projections is that while the methodology is for projected housing demand, the final result does not actually represent what a community needs to build over the next 2 decades. So you're not, evaluated on how much you have built. Rather, it represents what capacity a community should plan for in their community plans and land use bylaws to accommodate this projection in the chance that it does occur. Furthermore, pre-planning for this zoning or this capacity is actually only strictly required for municipalities. However, adapting local bylaws for the anticipated demand is actually a pretty useful and fruitful exercise for all communities. Next slide. So in excess of what's required for the interim requirements, we produced internal estimates at Turner Drake and in consultation with Macola to distribute housing demand across 3 different price categories and dwelling unit size. So these being, or the price categories being market priced housing, affordable or below market housing, and deeply affordable housing. Deeply affordable housing would be those units that are tied to income assistance or levels of income assistance, and then affordable below market housing would be like rent geared to income. It could be co-op housing, community homes on community land trusts, etc. And so what we see is that by 2041, projections suggest that demand could be accommodated by about 792 units of market housing, leaving the remainder as ideally met by affordable and deeply affordable units. Again, another important note is that these estimates aren't actually meant to be exact numbers, although they appear to be so. What's more important is that they're seen as general guidelines for prioritizing efforts across these different housing forms as you move forward with those changes to land use bylaws, community policies, etc. Next slide. So a couple key points for consideration. So while future growth accounts for much of the projected demand and contributes much to those calculations, a notable portion stems from an existing shortage. This is most often led by what's known as suppressed households, specifically since 2006. This means those households that could not enter or move to the local market due to unhealthy market conditions. And so this highlights the importance of accommodating both historically unmet and future demand through assessing development capacities. So current legislation specifically aims to promote enough development through these demand calculations to start alleviating these shortages while keeping up with future changes. When it comes to the type of housing, whether it's market housing or non-market housing, market housing is mostly distributed across larger dwelling forms, mostly because it reflects preferences for size of units, whereas non-market housing generally distributes to smaller unit sizes, acknowledging that achieving housing in many ways means meeting spatial requirements or minimum spatial requirements. Provincial legislation. So we're doing this update now. It's 2024. It's going to be 2025. Provincial legislation mandates that regular housing needs reports are updated frequently, or at least regularly, with the next due after this process in 2028. So what these do is provides an opportunity to assess progress against targets, recalibrate based on new conditions or new housing market conditions, and ensure that communities stay aligned with housing capacity goals over the short term, medium term, and long term, being that 20-year period. And with that, I believe that's the last slide. Questions?
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. That was a lot in there. Any questions from the board? Director Boyko.
Thank you, through the chair. So we're doing a 5-year projection, but it's based on 2021. So even though it's 2024, it's actually like a 1.5 or 2-year projection. Is that correct?
That is correct. And there's a little bit of nuance around that. So the previous iteration of the housing needs reports, they required us to do projections over the next 5 years. There wasn't that long-term component. And so that 5-year number is more so left in there as a legacy item. So what we often say is don't necessarily look at the 5-year, although it's required. The biggest piece of information or what needs to be given the most attention is that 20-year projection, because that is specifically for the municipalities, that number that they need to follow when amending or looking at zoning capacity.
Okay, so we did a 5-year plan 3 years ago in 2021, and now we're doing a 5-year plan now. And from what we required in 2021 till now, so 3.5 years, nothing is actually, we haven't actually made anywhere close to the predicted number of housings that we required. Am I reading that correctly? Like, say the report said we need to make 100 houses. In reality, we've only made 10 in the past since 2021. When I go through all the building reports and everything else, is that right?
Without knowledge of the building report specifically,
So yeah,
that is,
Beaufort by 2026, we're supposed to have 33, and we've
Yep.
actually only made 2. So roughly 10% has actually been happened. So is this actually going to be actionable? Is it useful? I mean, we're going to use it for planning purposes and increasing density and building higher and all these kind of nice things, but the reality is it's not actually happening.
right. And in many ways, like the reality reflects kind of the conditions of the market at the time. And while there might be demand, the cost of building housing might be prohibitive. So that's why the angle that the province is taking on this is not necessarily having to build the housing, but at least through zoning, creating the opportunities for that housing to be built. So recognizing that even if the zoning is there, sometimes the building might not come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Steer. Then Director Sparrow.
Yeah, thank you. And I recognize this report was for the electoral areas, and I'm coming from the municipality, but I do want to share some of the concerns that do come out around this, and it's mostly around during the requirements for the housing demand as one component. One of the challenges that we're finding is that there's not a corresponding look from the province on those areas that have to correspond with the quote growth specifically around housing, and that comes from provincial jurisdictions around schools, capacity for schools, capacity for policing, healthcare, and the list goes on. This also corresponds at the local government level for our ability to respond in those ways with the infrastructure that's required, aka water, sewer, and I would also include recreation in there. So I think it's important for the board to recognize, whether they're in electoral areas or in the municipalities, that we look collectively to the province to help support us in those ways, because we just cannot do it alone, and we certainly are forgetting a major component. We can put the people in the houses, but we have to have the infrastructures around that, our schooling, our policing, and everything else that corresponds to that. So I think it's important for the board to recognize that, and we have opportunities through ADICC and UBCM to lobby and as a collective group to bring that to the attention of the province. Thank you for the report, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, can I comment on that as well? I would say that's been what we've been hearing with other municipalities and districts that we've been working with, is that this is an advocacy tool as well, being able to kind of see this and see the projected demand and growth that you can point to this. Again, they're not perfect projections. They may change in the next 5 years, but it's something that you can point to show that, you know, investment from the province will be required to actually be able to meet some of these projections.
I'll also add on to that too. What's interesting too about this as an advocacy tool is that a lot of the numbers that are being produced are the result of a methodology that the province is creating. And so in many ways, you're using the numbers that the province is giving you. And so there's not really any way for them to argue against sort of approach. So there's a nice little unknowing support that potentially the province may not have kind of considered originally, or maybe they had, and this is one of those, like, maybe we're trying to get all on the same page, right? So yes, advocacy tool, it is a huge element of advocacy for improving facilities, amenities, all related to housing.
Thank you, Director Sparrow.
Well, thank you for that. From what I'm hearing, you're saying municipalities almost have a must to do, whereas EA areas would like to do sort of, I think. And is there any punishment for not achieving the goals? It sounds like the cities are more restricted what they have to do.
So there's no, so from a like building activity or inventory that's been built over time or over the next 2 decades, there's no penalty for not building enough. I'm not sure if there's any penalty in regards to the amendment of local zoning bylaws for the adequate amount of capacity to deal with that demand. That's not something that I've heard of so far, but that's again, mostly what they're concerned with is their capacity to accommodate that growth over time, not necessarily is there going to be a new building or apartment building or type of dwelling on each of those lands that have been zoned accordingly. And then, yes, for municipalities, it is a required thing for them to do as part of their official plan, community official plan, and land use bylaw amendment process. But it's highly recommended, and it's an exercise for the electoral areas because it is, I mean, it's potential growth that's going to be coming over the next 2 decades. And so as planners, it's best to look at that, acknowledge, and plan accordingly.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd like to thank both of you for coming here today and presenting your report. That was awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to meet with us. We appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Next on the agenda is Randy Thillen, Fire Smart Coordinator, ACRD, regarding Fire Smart update. I didn't recognize you with that new look you're wearing.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here today to speak to you about our current Fire Smart project that we have operating right now, starting in May of 2023 and concluding at the end of April in 2025. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the overview of the activities we've completed to date. We're going to outline some remaining objectives that we have, give you some stats, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So this joint project is not, hang on, sorry, pardon me. There you go. Okay, perfect. Not my usual device, so I'm a little out of sorts here. Okay. So our joint project is supported by resolutions from each of our partners, the City of Port Alberni, Hoopachesset First Nation, and Shot First Nation. And the Fire Smart Coordinator position in the slide there is highlighted in bold to draw your attention to the fact that it is now a required item to have to apply for funding. You need to have at least one Fire Smart position in place. And so this position is fully funded by the Fire Smart grant, and it's intended to service each partner area. We also, as part of this grant, have part-time funding in place for the Port Alberni Fire Department to complete residential assessments within the City of Port Alberni. So a big pillar in Fire Smart is education, and we've maintained a robust public education program, attending various public events throughout each of our partner areas. We've attended markets, public events, festivals, fairs, fire department open houses, home shows, emergency preparedness events along the West Coast, Bamfield, and in the region here as well. We've completed pop-up sessions in Bamfield, and the folks at the market are kind enough to let me set up there throughout the summer, every couple of weeks. And the folks at the general store on the west side let me do a little show and go there as well. We've completed neighborhood walks in the Long Beach electoral area, as well as in Bamfield, distributing the home assessment information as a way to reach out to those folks. And we've presented the Fire Smart BC education program material at 2 Pro D Day Parks and Rec camps, as well as 1 session with the BC Wildlife Federation Youth Camp that was held in Beaver Creek. And of course, we leverage any opportunity to work with BC Wildfire Crews and other like-minded organizations. Another pillar within the Fire Smart grant is community planning and development considerations. Our current community wildfire protection plan was last updated in 2019, and it's a first generation plan that was born out of the firestorms of 2003. During the 25 to 27 grant cycle, we'll be required to not convert but write a community wildfire resiliency plan. And this is a 2nd generation plan that incorporates the Fire Smart principles and goals that the province wants us to follow. And during this process, our current community wildfire protection plan is for the Alberni Valley and Bamfield electoral area. And in this process, we'll be creating a plan for the Alberni Valley and a separate plan for the Bamfield electoral area, much like we did for the Long Beach electoral area a grant cycle ago. As well, work has begun on community land use and development through updates to official community plans in both the city and the electoral areas. And if approved, some of this work will be supported through the next Fire Smart grant cycle. So interagency cooperation. During our current Fire Smart grant, we've established another required thing by the province, and that's a Community Fire Smart and Resiliency Committee. We have chosen to call it the Community Fire Smart Resiliency Network, and we meet twice yearly right now. The purpose of this group is to facilitate communication amongst the various stakeholders, to coordinate, plan, and share information on how to successfully implement the 7 Fire Smart disciplines at a regional level. We have stakeholders from federal agencies like Parks Canada, provincial agencies like BC Wildfire, MODI, BC Parks. Of course, our local governments are there, and all 10 First Nations within the regional district are invited to participate as well. And then community forest groups and other groups as necessary. Lastly, as part of interagency cooperation, once a year, Fire Smart BC hosts a wildfire resiliency and training summit. And what that is they bring together both firefighters and Fire Smart people, and they spend a week training in firefighting techniques, as well as learning all about the Fire Smart side of the house in terms of prevention and developing resiliency. And during this current grant cycle, we've been able to we had funding in place to send up to 10 staff from our various partners. I guess a shameless plug there is that the picture that you see on the slide is myself and Caitlin Minville, the emergency program coordinator for Tashot First Nation, and we were invited to present at the 2024 conference in Prince George this year to speak on our unique partnership that we have here in the Valley. Emergency planning is another pillar of Fire Smart, and we've we've been able to host wildfire specific tabletop exercises through Fire Smart grant funding in each of the last 3 grants. And at the last session in February 24, we had 31 different stakeholder agencies and over 50 people at this session. We used external expertise to help develop this exercise and facilitate it, as well as input from our internal staff as well. Training and cross-training. So there's a number of opportunities through the Fire Smart grant funding to train staff in emergency management courses, EOC courses, as well as the term cross-training for our structural firefighters to learn about wildfire firefighting. And we are fortunate enough to be able to deliver a program this year in the Valley called the Wildland Structure Protection Program. And the city of Port Alberni was kind enough to host that by allowing us to use their Echo Fieldhouse. And the Fall Fair folks were kind enough to let us use their site for the practical sessions. We had over 25 local firefighters from both regional fire departments as well as the city fire department there. And in the top corner, we see there, we hosted a wildfire mitigation specialist training course here at Beaver Creek Fire Department. And all 10 attendees at that training were from the ACRD and our grant partners. The wildfire mitigation specialist is a person that is specialized in doing the next level of assessment. And that's where you get into, when you achieve a certificate there, you get a break in your home insurance. Critical infrastructure. So a big part of our funding that we get in the grant goes towards our critical infrastructure, and we've successfully assessed quite a few of our critical infrastructure. We started out in 2021 assessing 21 various sites using a consultant to do that work. And then 2022, we did 5 more, 23, 24. So we're over 60 sites that we've assessed. And the reason the number was growing is as the Fire Smart program is developed in BC, they've updated the criteria there and allowed other critical infrastructure to be included in that category. And so we're taking the opportunity to assess all those by definition. So we have that information in place to be able to apply and inform our funding requests. Currently in this grant, we have approximately 120,000 in funding to complete mitigation work at 10 sites. Some examples would be at the West Coast General Hospital. We completed that a while ago. We did some work at the Sprout Lakeshore Fire Department station. The 2 projects that are outstanding still are funding to do vegetation management work around the exterior of the Banfield Community School. And I'm pleased to let everybody know that the school board will be posting the RFQ for that work either today or tomorrow. And so we expect that work to be accomplished in the new year. And then lastly, we'll be finishing the work around the outside of the ACRD main building here. One of the additions to this category is that they've recognized what they call community assets, and those are sites that are owned and operated by local groups of society or something like that. And the other criteria is that they might be identified in your emergency plan to be used for something like a reception center or group lodging, that sort of thing. And so we're in the process of completing those assessments at this time as well. I should note that while they've expanded the list to complete the assessments, not every site may be eligible for funding. The residential part of the Fire Smart grant is really the pillar of our program here locally. We've had exceptional uptake in our home assessments program, doubling the number of assessments completed in each successive grant. So we started out with approximately 24 in 2021 and then so on. And in this current grant, we hit our targeted amount with about 4.5 months to go. And the city and Sprout Lake were by far the leaders of the pack in the numbers of assessments completed in the 50 range. We did 7 in Banfield, 21 in Beaver Creek, 16 in Beaufort electoral area, 16 in Cherry Creek, and 16 in Long Beach. And as well, over 24 at Tashot. And we're about to do a bunch at our partner, our Hoop Chessett's territory as well. One of the things that we're doing with our First Nations partners is taking a look at their social housing to see if there's opportunities there for them to leverage other areas of funding through Finesse or places or ISK. And so next steps. So basically, the next grant is based on the fact that we're going to have a Fire Smart position, that we're going to continue to participate in the Community Fire Smart Resiliency Committee. And that we're going to update our community wildfire resiliency plans to make sure that they're current. I've had the opportunity to work in this position from the first time it was hired in 2022 till now, and I've witnessed a lot of growth in it. We started with little or no interest in the program. It was pretty much like trying to push a piece of wet rope up a hill. In fact, I had one individual tell me that Fire Smart wasn't very useful here because we don't get fires like that here. Since that time, like I said, we've doubled our number of assessments. And we are, having said that, we are at basically a capacity in terms of being able to do more without increasing the number of people doing the work. We have a unique partnership here with our Fire Smart grant. We have our regional government with 6 EAs. We have a municipal government involved with us and 2 First Nations. And really, I'm only aware of one other partnership in the province, and that's Kitimat with the local nation there. And really, that's the reason that Caitlin and I were invited to the residency conference in Prince George, was to speak about that. It's challenging for both our finance staff to keep up to that grant, and it's even more challenging for UBCM to figure out how to give us the money for that, because the criteria are quite different throughout all 3 areas. It's important to note that while we are well positioned as the regional district to host Fire Smart in the whole region, it is a 6,600 square kilometer area, and we have 10 First Nations, 3 municipalities, et cetera, et cetera. And so while we're well positioned to host that, we are not the gatekeepers on Fire Smart. Any one of our partners or any of the other regional stakeholders are able to pursue their goals. And one of the criteria in the next upcoming grants and moving forward, as with all other things, is that consultation is required with your neighboring locations as you achieve these goals. And so whether we want to be involved in things like fuel management or other initiatives, we're going to be at that table regardless. And so all I can do is I can recommend this program to you folks. It's really grown. There's a lot of interest in it, and I think that there's an opportunity to continue to leverage the funding that's available and keep doing good work with the infrastructure that we have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. In this day and age with climate change, it's really important. Dr. Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. Quick question. So you've done 4 dozen odd assessments this year, plus minus. How many have actually payments been made to people to do work on their property up to the $1,000 that's mentioned? Like, how many people actually have work actually done or do it themselves and get some kind of funding for that?
Yeah, through the chair, the Director Boyko, sorry, I skipped over that note. Just to be clear, we've completed well over 200 residential assessments. It's the critical infrastructure that was in the 40 number. And so to date, we've given out 30 rebates for an approximate value of $22,000. Not everybody claims or are able to claim the full $1,000. It's 50% of whatever you spend up to $1,000. And it includes hiring somebody to do the work, buying materials to repair something on your building or such. And then also they pay you $29 an hour for your sweat equity. That total, 50% of that is what you get. A lot of folks are getting between $350 to $650 just for their sweat equity. And so that's been a great thing. One of the trends that we noted from our 22 grant was that most of the rebate applications didn't happen until almost the end of the grant. So I would expect that from January to March of next year that we're going to receive a number more in terms of the rebates. But at the end of the day, we're at 30 rebates for $22,000.
Thank you, Director Beckett.
Thank you, Randy, for your report, for the work that you're doing in the region and specifically in Banfield. I've talked to the school principal and others, and I've seen you set up at the store, and I can appreciate that it's slow moving, but it's a good start. My question in particular, and I did Google the Fire Smart Building Sprinkler Grant I know that you're familiar with the fire hall, the school. You've probably seen the start of the new beautiful community hall that we're putting in there. All of those buildings are very important to the community. Of course, they exist within the forest. I mean, it's the risk from a wildland interface fire is very real. So my question is, and it dawned on me as I watched the new community hall going up, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a interface sprinkler system on the exterior of that building as it's being built, rather than trying to retrofit it. So again, the question would be, is there any funding available for the school, the fire hall, and the community hall as an example for the community of Banfield?
Through the chair to Director Beckett. So it's a kind of a twofold answer. There is funding available, but it isn't available to put permanent fixtures on those buildings. The funding goes more towards equipping fire departments, that sort of thing. We haven't explored it that much because it is a pretty, there's a number of training requirements that go with having that equipment as well. It's not just setting up sprinklers on a roof and letting it run 24/7, because it has to be well placed and it has to be effective. The second part of my answer to you is this: if you haven't had an opportunity to do so, you should take a look at the report that was just released after the 2023 fires in the Okanagan. The reason that data is so important is we have the 2003 firestorms as a base. They rebuilt all those areas, and then FireSmart became a thing, and they've done a ton of FireSmart work. And so when they went in and did the after action investigations and studies of the area, they were able to determine how successful FireSmart was for those areas. And it's an interesting read because the challenge with those fires, and the reason why the fire jumped the lake so quickly, is with the elevated temperatures that we experience in the summertime, you get a lot of hot air moving up, pulling cold air in. And as that fire gets going, it's developing wind speeds in front of itself that are in the 90 to 100, and Jasper was over 100 kilometers an hour. So it's not picking up like a twig or a blade of grass that's an ember blowing ahead of the fire. It's picking up like softball-sized chunks of wood and blowing them over 2 kilometers away. And so a fire chief there at the conference in Prince George told me it doesn't matter where the ember comes from. It matters what you have on the building and immediately around it. And so by that we mean lightweight and combustible fuels, so dirty roofs, needles, moss, that sort of stuff. Storage around the outside, immediately around and vegetation around the outside of the building. If you don't have those lightweight fuels that are easily ignited by an ember, the ember is just going to land on the ground and burn itself out. To the point of the sprinklers, water can only absorb so much heat. And one of the effects that they're having in the firefighting world is that during the daytime, bucketing and tankers aren't as effective at certain points in the day because that water is vaporizing and disappearing before it ever gets to the ground. And so the whole point of FireSmart is to create a passive defense on that building so that if the whole area was evacuated, that building is going to survive the wildfire, the effects of a wildfire, without having to do any interventions. By doing that kind of work around our infrastructure and our properties, if there is a situation where firefighters have to intervene, because we've reduced those fuels and the fire has been allowed to reduce in intensity, we create what we call defendable space and the firefighters can do their work. So sorry if that's a long-winded answer, but it's there's a lot of good work happening in the Banfield area. Our challenge there is what do we do with the material when we remove it?
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Randy, for the work that you've been doing in the community. I know people that have actually had you come and do the inspection, and they've had access to grants, so it is working. I'm just wondering about home insurance because I asked about that with my own home insurance. So has anyone been able to access lower insurance costs? And would something like the Sprout Lake Community Hall be able to access lower insurance because of the Fire Smart that's been done around? One last question. Do you know if the Thunderbirds, because they did a project right beside the community hall, do you know if they're actually doing any more of the Fire Smart programs? Thank you.
Through the chair, to Director Cote. I know you got a pretty robust schedule today, and so I don't want to occupy too much time. Perhaps we could talk about the community hall outside the venue or outside this forum. But to answer your question, yes, we have made use of the local fighter group, not specifically at Sprout Lake, but we've done some work around some of the critical infrastructure, water infrastructure onto Shotland and other areas. As you know, it was a pretty wet start to the year. And so they were looking for what their nickname for it is saw work. And so we made use of those opportunities. As far as the insurance side of things, that's new to this area. But what it is you request the higher level assessment when you do all the mitigation work that's been recommended. That whole file is evaluated by provincial Fire Smart staff. You get a certificate and then you take that to your insurance company and they will provide you with whatever discount that is. And I can't speak to what the discount could be because there's so many different ways to insure a property depending on value, replacement, that sort of stuff. So that's an individual conversation. For the homeowner, a number of insurers like BCAA, Wawanesa, and a few others, cooperators, I believe they're really getting into the game and partnering with Fire Smart BC. And some are even getting to the point where if you'll just get the assessment done, they'll give you $100 off, that kind of thing. So if you know of anybody that's interested in finding out more about that, have them contact me directly because there'll be opportunities for that.
Thank you. So is that certificate or whatever issued by yourself or?
It's issued by the Fire Smart BC staff. So sidebar on that is that Fire Smart BC has just taken over that program from Fire Smart Canada, and they're in the process of rebranding it right now. So it'll be starting up again in January. We've had, I think, around half a dozen assessments completed through that program. None of the assessments have gotten to the point where they're applying for the certificate. The difference being is when we do a regular home assessment, we give you a written report with some recommendations about, remove the bark mulch from around your house, trim your trees, that kind of stuff, clean your roof and gutters. And you can choose to do that or not. And nobody's going to show up later and say, here's a fine because you didn't do that. Under the wildfire mitigation specialist assessment, we give you a list of recommendations on things that you need to mitigate on your building. And in order to get the certificate, you have to do that work. And it may mean removing the bottom part of your siding and putting in cement fiber, or changing out all your windows from single pane to multi-pane, and on down the line. The interesting thing about doing that work is you're actually, while the cost up front may be significant, over the lifespan of the building, there's a number of studies out there, economic studies that support it, that it's a lot cheaper in the long run because the maintenance afterwards is so much less. So.
Thank you, Director Sparrow.
Thank you for that. Good work, man. Keep going. And in the same vein, I have a letter from my insurance company saying that they can come on my property if there's a fire within so many kilometers to do assessment, but they wouldn't raise my rates because of it. So it's sort of a backwards thing. How's that sound? So, yeah, I'm aware of a couple of insurance companies that engage some private mitigation teams that will attend areas where there's a fire burning. We first saw it happen in Alberta last year when the fires started up around Fort Mac and those areas. And because you have a contract with them, you're giving them money, they're going to insure your home. They're going to come and provide that service to you, whether you request it or not, kind of thing. And they're essentially test driving to see if that's going to be effective at reducing their risk. But they don't do the mitigation work the way you would do the mitigation work. They roll in with saws and brush saws, and whether you like your juniper hedge or not, it's cut to the ground. If you like your cedar fence or not, it's cut to the ground and removed, right? So it's my advice would to anyone would be, if you want your property to, you know, continue to look as nice as you like it, you might want to put some time into doing that work yourself rather than having them make that choice for you.
True. I have the right to refuse, but it probably costs me some money.
Yeah.
Well, my question of all that is, I read in your report there that, about twice a year you have chipping ideas of chipping.
Our curbside,
Curbside pickup.
our curbside pickup actually runs continuously throughout the grant. And so residents in the Alberni Valley, so the 4 electoral areas, the city, as well as the 2 nations, we provide that service. They call, provide their address and contact information. They're allowed 2 piles of woody debris. And we will come and collect that for free. With the hopes that they're doing the mitigation, not in the hopes, but that they're doing the mitigation work. Because often the recommendations are prune your trees, remove this, do that, and it creates a pile of material. And we've had excellent uptake in the program. We've had to, or we had the ability to reach out to our UBCM and request permission to reallocate some funding to that line because we spent the WAD at the end of November, basically. So, and we still have 4 months to go. We've had good uptake throughout the whole region on it, but particularly in the city, mostly because folks in the city don't have a way to dispose of branches and pruning, even though they have the green bin. And most folks out in the rural areas tend to build a pile and burn it, right? So it's.
Well, my question is the fact that let people do their pruning in the spring with the fruit trees and that, right? And they have to pay $15 a load to get rid of it. And in the fall, they do some other pruning, pay $15 and they have a gold on. We could find a way of scheduling it so we could, well, you know, contact with you to pick it up for free.
Yeah.
It would solve a lot of problems. So if that can somehow be coordinated, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, so we run it year round because it really make a difference if the branches that blew out of your trees through the last windstorm are picked up in January or April. There's still going to be fuel on the ground, right? So we run it continuously. The 2 areas that we have a challenge with are the Long Beach electoral area as well as Banfield. Just simply because we just don't have the same infrastructure in place to consume that material. The funding guidance from FireSmart is whatever residential vegetation management program we come up with, we cannot leave that material there. It has to be taken away.
So if somebody wants to create a pile of branches, they could contact you and you can.
Yep, just call the front office and they'll forward them to me and I will add them to the list. Every week we provide the list to our contractor and he goes and completes the pickups the following week.
Great. So, yeah, be great. Get some information on that and I'll send it out. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic service. Any other questions for Randy? Fantastic. Thank you very much, Randy. We appreciate you coming in today. Next on the agenda is correspondence for action. We have a letter from Hawaii First Nations requesting a letter of support for grant application to support a food security initiative. And it's very timely after the presentation we had this morning. Any questions or comments? This was the late item that was emailed to everybody and was just passed out by Heather. Director Beckett?
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to ask Chair John Jack to speak to this. However, I do have some notes. So HFN is looking to create a local hydroponic vertical farming project. My understanding is that, and I could be wrong, I believe it's going to be in the Anakla Banfield area, providing fresh produce year round for our communities. They're working with and pointed me to a company called Grocer, GROWCER Inc., which uses refurbished sea containers to create this stackable vertical hydroponic growing. They're applying for a federal local food infrastructure grant, and we're looking for a letter from the board to support their initiative. As area director, I'm very excited about this project and would appeal to the board to consider their request for a letter of support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you making that motion, Director Beckett?
I am, please.
Thank you so much. Could I get a seconder? Seconded by Director Cote. Director Boyko?
Thank you. I got two questions. In our new bylaws, we are against stacking of containers, and containers are not allowed to be used by the BC Building Code. Now, are we going to allow this just because it's going to be on reserve land and BC Building Code doesn't apply and our bylaws don't apply? Because if this is done in Banfield or any electoral area, the method of construction is not allowed. Thank you.
Do you have a response to that, Director Beckett, or Daniel? You're good? Because Director Jack is not here.
I'm not sure that we have a response for that. I'm not sure, Director Beckett, that you have a response for that. I do know that at the end of the day, we do work with the nation in terms of the application of the building code. And that is something that we would have to work through with them. I don't think I don't think it would be enough cause to not support a grant. If they get the grant, I think it's fair to say that we work with them to make sure that we're either adhering to or getting proper waivers to the application of the building code. But it would be under their jurisdiction as treaty lands as to what they're applying. And I don't know the details of their treaty sufficiently to say whether they've adopted the BC Building Code or not.
Thank you. Dr. Sparrow?
Thank you. The way I read it is a stackable trays as opposed to vertical, not stackable buildings. So you're like 4 trays on one building, unless I'm reading it wrong.
Still says shipping containers.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is correspondence for information. We have a letter from the Union of British Columbia Municipalities advising that the 2024 Assessment Managing Planning Program went to take approval agreement in terms of conditions of funding. We have a letter from the Port Alberni Port Authority regarding the Dot Plus Market Analysis Survey. A letter from Port Alberni Association for Community Living, Community Conversation and Connection, Port Alberni and surrounding communities. I thought that was a really good read. If you haven't read it yet, please read it. From the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, friendly reminder regarding deadlines for the 2025 AVICC convention that would be held on April the 11th to the 13th, 2025 in Nanaimo. And also the first virtual webinar, Finishing Strong Confidence and Courage in Turbulent Times, of What We Heard report. And I believe that was recorded, but I did attend it. And I think if it was recorded, I'm going to listen to it again. If you weren't able to attend it, it was excellent. I really enjoyed it. And a letter of update from Claire Trevina, Director, Central Vancouver Island and Northern Georgia Strait Region from the BC Ferry Authority. Does anybody want to pull anything out? Director Cote.
Thank you. Just the AVICC, yes, everybody, if anyone hasn't seen that, it is on YouTube, on the website for AVICC. And number E, Claire Trelevin, it's in her information that she's planning to reach out to communities. So I'm just wondering if we would like to invite her to talk about the BC ferries. It's a important issue to us all so that we can travel throughout BC, and there's talk of increasing costs. So be nice to know what's happening. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. And I'm sure Heather will be on top of that. I see her nodding her head. Director Beckett.
Thank you. I too was going to refer to item E, Ms. Trevina, and ask her to appear. And I think that in preparation for her to speak to the board, not only would I want her to speak about the province, but more specifically, I'd like to have her brief us in a fair amount of detail regarding the relationship between BC Ferries and the wonderful service that the Lady Rose Marine Service provides. We've got some history where communications has not been as strong as it could have been in the past with BC Ferries, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for her to share her perspective and bring us up to date on what's going on with the service that's provided in our immediate region. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You get a motion that the Board of Directors receive items A through E for information. Moved by Director Johnson, second by Director Coots. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is request for decisions and bylaws. Request for decision bylaw F1165-4, 2024 to 2028 financial plan amendment, Beaver Creek Fire Protection, additional information. And Charlie Starrett, Regional Fire Service Manager, is going to be speaking to this. Please go ahead, Charlie.
Good afternoon, through the chair. Yes, this is a request that was deferred from the November 27th board meeting. The request is for an additional $60,000 to be added to the already approved funding for this fire truck. The request is also for the approval of the purchase of the truck from Fort Garry Fire for a cost of $805,349.41, excluding GST. And the updated information that was requested at the last meeting has been added into the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Roth and then Director Sparrow. Please go ahead, Director Roth.
Thank you. I went over this yesterday quite extensively, and this is what I've come up with. In July 2020, the Beaver Creek Fire Department took possession of a new pumper fire truck. Taxpayers paid a total of $643,500, excluding GST, for the new apparatus. Now, 4 years later, staff are recommending the purchase of another new truck, a Type 1 tactical water tender. The cost of this truck is $805,000, excluding GST, and it is meant to replace a current fire truck referred to as Engine 51. The staff report says that Engine 51 is 25 years old and will need to be retired by 2030. That gives us 5 years to put aside funds for the purchase. I'd like to move that staff pause actioning the purchase of a new fire truck. We need to stop increasing taxes to purchase assets that are not essential at this time. I would like the Board of Directors to direct staff to find cost-effective ways to maximize the lifespan of the present truck, Engine 51, as set out in the Fire Underwriters Service Schedule for fire apparatus for fire insurance rating purposes. Thank you.
Would anybody like to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Moved by Director Roth, second by Director Boyko, and you have some questions. Please go ahead. I apologize, Director Sparrow. Please go ahead.
Give her that. I too have some questions. I mean, if this was 10 years from now and it was time for the first line truck to become second line truck, then great, I'd be behind you. But it's only been 4 years. And last month we had, there was going to be a $300,000 loan plus this amendment to the budget. So my first question is, what is the percentage increase in taxes for the average Beaver Creek house based on the recent assessment for the assessed value of this truck in percentage? Does anybody know?
That would take significant calculation. I don't know off the top of my head if we can come back with it.
Well, the reason I'm asking, we're trying to figure out the budgets for the next few years, and this is going to happen in 2026. So we are predisposing the next people in line with a line item today that they're going to pay for, and they don't know the budget increase in percentage form. So it's not really fair that way.
Sure. Before we move on from that one, So in anticipation of apparatus purchase, we have been putting away for reserves for quite some time, which is why we're not borrowing for the entire amount on the fire truck. And so typically until last year, I believe we've been putting aside about 180,000. Last year, we reduced that to 120. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about the impacts, assuming that we would continue at or return back to the original 180 that we've been putting aside. And again, assuming that it would take 2 years for the truck to be delivered, it is fair to say that we're saying we would need to borrow, but there's a high likelihood that we would not need to borrow in order to purchase the apparatus. And part of that is just in planning for this. But I think this is where when we talk about budgets around any one of the services, and right now it's fire, we do try and set aside reserves. And what those reserves are really doing is they're reducing these big swing impacts that we see when we take on various projects. And so for the fire departments, those projects are the purchase of apparatus. It could be renovations to fire halls, etc. But that is the intent of those reserves. And what we do when we build those reserves is we're identifying those projects that we have over time. So in the case of both these apparatus, they were identified. The first one, 2019, was ordered and we've received it. It's the front line. This is not a front line, but it still will need to be replaced by, within the next 5 years, by 2030. And our reasoning at a staff level is that when we're within that 5 years, typically we've actioned the process of the replacement. It doesn't mean we have to, and certainly we could delay. I would say it's prudent if you wanted to delay to not delay more than 3 years, because we know it'll take 2 years to receive the apparatus. You could push the full 5 years and ask for an exemption with the fire underwriters, but that's not guaranteed. So you want to try and operate within those 30 years to get the apparatus in. Our concern with that, and the reason why we bring it forward, is that when we look at the scenario that we have, we know that since the last apparatus was ordered in 2019, that the equivalent apparatus 5 years later is worth $550,000 more. So roughly $100,000 a year in increases. And we also know that we're looking at a geopolitical landscape right now where there's threats of tariffs at the border on steel, which would impact the costs. There's also a Canadian dollar that is dropping, which would impact our costs. Because a lot of these apparatus are not locally sourced. They're actually international and often require a chassis from the States. And so the decision is the board's, and that's okay. But we feel right now that the cost for the 3 years of difference is likely the better cost that we'll get. If the board decides against it, that's okay. The fire department can continue operating. We'll come back later when it truly meets the end of its life. But we're not sure that it'll cost less, is the point when we get to the finances. And ideally, we would not want to borrow at all when we purchase the apparatus, if that makes sense.
I got a few. Okay. One of the things that was brought up was the lack of used good fire trucks, or extend the lifespan between the two. So I read this report, and on page 83, there's a chart of all the fire trucks in the valley. And on one of the bottom lines below the chart, it says that Superior shuttle accreditation is only good for 20 years. Okay. That means that Squirrel Lake has a number of trucks that have a shorter lifespan than anybody else in the valley. And if you look at that list, there are 3 trucks, I believe, that are available. Their lifespan is done. And the one I was looking at was truck 41. Truck 41 is a 2008 frontline pumper, which actually is more than 15 years old, so that should be second line. But in 2028, should reach a 20-year lifespan, which no longer means accreditation for that service, which means they can still use it as a fire truck, but they can't get accredited in their fire shuttle Superior. There's also a 2002 and a 2004 that are past their lifespan. They're no longer accredited, but are still used as secondaries. So there is an availability of a truck in the valley that has more lifespan available in it to help push this out. I'm not against fire trucks. I'm against them being so close together. It's my big push. I'm sure an asset transfer would help out both Sprout Lake and Beaver Creek in assessing their lifespan between the two, if that's available, if we want to do that. But to further that, and to really go far offline here again, if that is the case, and if Sprout Lake does have a 20-year lifespan on their vehicles, would it be prudent for us to ask the AVICC for advocacy to see if we can extend this lifespan of Superior Shuttle accreditation to the same level as the service schedule for firefighters for fire insurance grading, to see if they can get to the 30-year lifespan like the rest of us? That'd be a great boon for Lake if that would be put through the AVICC.
Do you have any comments on that, Charlie?
Yes, I know that provincially and nationally, they're looking to extend fire truck life. And from my discussions with the fire service underwriters, they have no intention of doing that. In fact, they would like to shorten the life. The risk for the insurance company is just so great, and they paid out so much money in the last little while, they don't want to go there. The risk also is not just the longevity of the vehicle, it's the built-in safety factors for both firefighters and the community. So whatever risk you're willing to take there.
True, but the risk was 1991 where they went to seat belts and picking people off the tailboard inside the cab. Now they have helmet holders and everything else too inside. So I know it's not a nice thing to do. I'm just trying to figure out a way of getting through this so we can alleviate the taxpayers' burden at the same time, stay within the fire underwriters accreditation that we have to stay in. And I think it's probably the best way of doing it. So those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Director Boyko, then Director Cote.
Thank you, Chair. So not everyone's gonna be able to see this, but I'll put it up here. Here's the rate of inflation, 2019, COVID spike. Obviously, our fire truck went down, and now we're back down here. Interest rates are coming down, everything else. So comparing, we all know that we had a huge cost increase of everything that you can possibly think of in the past 4 or 5 years, right? Those prices are never going to see again. Moving forward, I have a problem with buying something now that we need in 5 years and it takes 2 years to get here. Why don't we look towards getting it in 3 years and go through this whole process at that point? And at that time, something Director Sparrow said last meeting, get 2 mainline units in Beaver Creek, not have them 4 years apart, have them 10 years apart, 20-year lifespan, or whatever that will be if that changes. I think that's more fiscally prudent. How they got to this point, it is what it is. But as long as we can keep operating safely and keep things going, having them side by side and having that huge cost on taxpayers, we don't even know what our taxes are going to be next year, but with everything coming out of every other community in this area, it's looking to be large, and making it as small as possible is important. Yes, there is a risk that costs might go up, and they will go up in the next 3, 4, 5 years. But are we going to see 50% cost increases? That depends on when the next pandemic comes down our way, right? But you can't fearmonger cost increases to spend huge sums of money now. Thank you.
Director Cote, then Director Minions. Please go ahead, Director Cote.
Thank you. So through the chair to the board, Sprout Lake has a at least a 10 or 20 year budget outlook. They have itemized over the years what trucks we have in our line and when they need to be replaced. We budget for that, we borrow for that. And I think that Beaver Creek is very similar to Sprout Lake. I've been doing buying trucks and supporting my fire department for 20 years now. And I know it's very costly. I don't like having to spend money, but for the safety of my community, for the safety of my fire department, I want to make sure that we're covered. We're covered to the best extent that we can. With the underwriters, things are not going backwards at all. They're just getting more and more restrictive and prescriptive going forward. Conversation we had earlier regarding staffing and giving direction. We give direction to staff to come back with recommendations for us. And I'm not an expert. I think we have fire chiefs and fire departments. Charlie's here. I think that the recommendations that come forward are recommendations that we should follow. I think that they're not made lightly. There is very much mindset that we want, the staff know that we want to keep budgets within reason, that people in our communities have to pay. We are that people that sit at this board are peoples in our community that have to pay for these taxes. We're not above that. So I'm not a rich person, but I support my fire department and I would support this going forward. Knowing that our fire departments rely on each other in the valley isn't also an important thing to remember. I'm not willing to give away any of my trucks to other areas because they're there for a reason. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Cote. Director Minions, please go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversation we've had on this so far. And I think I have to say that I appreciate the prudent planning by our staff to, really work to ensure that we have what we need in all of the areas in order to keep people safe and in order to meet all the requirements of insurance and everything else. I think on this one, this is a Beaver Creek issue, and it doesn't necessarily from that perspective, matter personally to me how Beaver Creek chooses to proceed. But that said, I have great concern with the cost of fire trucks, as I'm sure many people do. And I think just the drastic rate at which some of these things are increasing. I have expressed concern at the city with how frequently we how many trucks we're replacing, and just the additional upcoming needs as well outside of the trucks. I think we all value the fire service. In fact, I know that many people on this board have obviously their own histories with that just support that even further. There's a deep understanding on this board. And I don't want us to get into a conversation about, whether we support or don't support the fire service, because I don't think there's a person here who doesn't understand how important this service is. But I feel as a board, we need to be utilizing our voices to advocate around this issue further. I really worry about this service getting unaffordable to municipalities. And sorry, not just municipalities, to local governments, because the cost escalations have gone up so drastically. I know that from Port Alberni's perspective, I worry about the sustainability of the service because the costs have gone up so drastically. And it's, obviously not just trucks, but I think trucks is an area where we are just getting gouged. And it is, it's staff's job to navigate the system that we're in. I think we need to be working together to go higher and try to make changes to the system. So, I know that there was a comment about the fire underwriter survey and advocating in that. And I think that Charlie is absolutely right. I think there's obviously not a desire to change. And we all know the challenges around insurance right now. But I have a problem with, I would personally have a problem with moving forward right now, because I think that there is potential for us to use our voices to advocate at a higher level, and hopefully to start to shift some of these things, or we will not be the only local government that stops replacing trucks and ends up in a much bigger challenge area than we are in right now. And lastly, I think that as a valley, You know, we said this when we replaced our last truck in the city, and we were told that, you know, we need to replace the truck because of the insurance costs and you have to have a certain amount of trucks. We have a lot of trucks in the valley, and I think that there has to be additional ways for us to leverage that. We have many departments, we have many brand new trucks. When we bought our last one, Beaver Creek had just bought one as well. And, you know, I know that we're getting some value for that in our insurance, but I just think that there's a higher level of collaboration. We can work together and maybe advocate for some higher level changes here, because I'm personally really struggling with the cost of some of these assets and the burden that it is placing on all of us to continue to replace them. So I appreciate the challenges expressed, and I think that we have to take this issue and try to make some more significant change to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments that are being made around the table, and I certainly would endorse that. You know, part of our 2025 plan moving forward would include an element of advocacy. I just also want to make sure that we're not depending on advocacy to resolve the issue by 2030, and because that's something that we may be successful on or may not be, and so as staff, all we can do is recommend. And we just want to make sure that at the end of the day, we have a solid strategy and then a recommended advocacy strategy, I think would make sense. I do just want to address the Director Boyko's term of fear mongering. The intent here is not to fear monger. Staff we have an important responsibility to share what it is we're looking at as we create the recommendation. And when this was deferred, it was deferred with a desire to see more what process we went through and create a better understanding of what information we're looking at. So this information was not meant to be emotionally charged. It was meant to be, this is what we're looking at. This is why we came to the board with this recommendation. And at the end of the day, it's okay if the board doesn't agree. The staff's role in this is not to sell you something. Staff's role is to provide a recommendation. And in the case of the deferral, it was to justify and provide greater depth into how we came to our recommendation. And so just want to make sure that we're clear with that, because you know, if the read of this was to create fear mongering in a decision, that is not the intent of what was drafted. And I just want to make sure we're abundantly clear with that. There's a lot of effort that went into assembling this in such a way that it was clear and reflected the efforts of the groups that have put together this information to end up with this recommendation. Again, I will reiterate, it is okay to not agree, and staff will absolutely respect the decision of the board.
Thank you. Dr. Roth.
Within that motion, there certainly is room to pause actioning for 3 years. And, you know, it wasn't, the point about the 5 years was just to say that the engine 51 is 25 years old and it doesn't have to be retired until 2030. So we have time. It doesn't have to happen today. And taxpayers, they can't afford this. They can't afford this all the time. So we have to be really cautious and smart. So I don't have a problem of putting wording in there that would say to pause actioning for 3 years of the purchase of the new fire truck.
Thank you, Director Jack.
Hi, thanks. I think my point on this one is gauging whether or not waiting 3 years is actually going to be worth it, given what may happen with well, with tariffs and the cost of actually purchasing these equipment. There's no guarantee that things will actually get better by then. In fact, most hard assets get more expensive as time goes by. So I think we're being penny-wise, and that's about it at this point. The decision's the decision at that point, and I'm fine with that. But I do think that actioning now and having a plan for the future to make sure that you're spacing them out over time can matter, but that looks like that's in here already. So I get that people have a concern around cost. However, hard assets, they're not going to get less expensive. In fact, in 3 years' time, we'll be in the middle of an American president who's very intent on tariffs and may be able to force them through, even if we have a sane Senate in the US. So I don't know that this is necessarily the wisest move, but it's certainly politically popular. So that might be something that should be considered as well. So thanks.
Dr. Boyko?
I don't know if we'll ever be able to tell the US Senate what to do, but that being said, so $1 million fire truck, 25 years, 40 grand a year. Spacing it out to maximize its use based on what the BC government tells us to do is very important to do. We obviously need to have a replacement in time that's here, so we continue coverage, make sure we keep our insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Firefighters can do their job like we all want them to do and love them doing, but we need to be fiscally prudent about it. Changing them out 5 years early, 3 years early, et cetera. We're not using our assets to the best use that we possibly can. Yes, prices are not going to go down in 3 years. That's very obvious. We hear things about tariffs, about things. We have no control over all this. We need to basically make a decision and move forward based on the best available information we have now, not something that's politically popular in the media with whatever side you're on. It doesn't matter. Thank you.
Dr. Sparrow?
Thank you. There's two sides of this coin when you get into this too close together fire trucks, and that is the 30-year lifespan of the fire truck before it's gone, but there's also a 15-year lifespan from your frontline fire truck. So if you get this truck in 2026, then in 2041, it ends up being your second truck, which means this truck now we currently have will still have lifespan left, which will no longer be available to us if we need to buy a new one. So we're shortening up the lifespan of the truck we have right now as your first line truck by getting this truck too early in the end of its life. And also we're putting two trucks too close together, which are actually putting a burden on the taxpayer. So we spread them apart and stay within the fire underwriters. We still are getting all the fire insurance we need, and we are getting alleviation of both trucks, the lifespan. So it is more of a double-edged sword people think about. And it isn't infuriating we have to do this, but we have to find a way of pulling these two ages apart so we can actually get back to budgeting correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cote.
Thank you. A question through the chair to staff. Would we not be putting money, would Beaver Creek not be putting money into a reserve over the next 5 years for a truck? In 5 years, that would cost more than today. So would it be a benefit to push it off, is what I'm saying, when really there's money going into a reserve anyway. So it's like you're paying for that truck already. Does that make sense?
Yes, we are putting money into reserve. In some years, the tax rate or tax impact to the community, the contribution to capital is what is the easiest to reduce in order to keep those tax increases at a level that the board's happy with. So it does tend to be, in general, the area that gets cut first. Add that to the fact that fire trucks are just going up in price, substantially higher than inflation over the past 5 years. Don't know what these next 5 look like, obviously. I'd say the other factor is supply and demand. So like in the last couple of years, as we've looked for trucks, we actually have numerous companies coming back and saying, we're not even interested in bidding because we're not bidding on anything anymore. We have a 2.5 year backlog and we're not interested in doing any more than that. And so that's a little bit of a challenge. So far, like in Bamfield, we didn't meet the FUS date for replacement. However, they gave us an extension, but that's not a guarantee. So if they were not to give that, what is the impact to the homeowner on your insurance? That's something I hope we never have to figure out, but is a potential risk if we don't meet those deadlines. So what does the market look like in 2 years? I have no idea, right? So this is a way of doing it where at this point, we know the only thing we know is costs continue to go up substantially, and that we're probably looking at 18 months, I would guess, to get this truck. And so what happens 2 years from now? Is that now 24 months, 36 months? And do we then miss that deadline? And are they okay with it? Are they not? Like, there's so many factors, and I completely hear what's being said about the taxpayer and all that, but it does add a different layer of risk. So it's just whatever the board is comfortable accepting in terms of a risk level is kind of where the decision lies. So yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Burkill.
So if I'm a person shopping for a pickup truck and I say, hey, they're too expensive this year, let me check next year. And then check next year. Can we not just do that and say we're in a price hump right now, whatever you want to call it? Everybody's busy for the next couple of years. Check next year. Beep. All right. Send a report to the board, get a quote, don't get a quote, whatever they don't want to do, and then do it again in a year. Can we not do something like that? Say, hey, let's buy it and reduce our risk of not having it, but be a smart shopper at the same time.
I'll let Charlie correct me if I'm wrong, but basically we have two companies that are building these, at least the chassis component of it. And so they really don't have a desire to drop those prices because the demand is way higher than the supply. So we absolutely can look next year, but do I think there's a possibility like a pickup truck where there's so much different supply that we'll have a reduction? No, I think that's incredibly unlikely. I think that these smaller outfits that used to exist 10 years ago don't exist. And there's basically the two large companies that are doing this work. I don't think that's going to change potentially. But again, I don't know.
To add to Terry's comments, we're already aware from the manufacturers that they've told us that we're going to have at least a $60,000 increase in the coming year based on the environmental protection changes that are coming. And the factories are already tooled up for that change, so there's no going back on that. And just to comment on availability, the larger cities in the Lower Mainland are to the point now where they're ordering 12 trucks at a time just to stay ahead.
Director Cote.
Thank you. I don't know who I would talk to, I guess. Charlie or who would know. Looking at the way that climate change is affecting our wildfire interface fires, I think that there's a desire for insurance companies to make sure that you're covered with apparatus to be able to fight these fires. Communities are relying more and more on working together within the valley to make sure that all of our departments are to the ability that we can help each other, because I think it's super important going forward, the way that we see how whole communities are wiped out, and working together here is important, and making sure that we have the proper apparatus. With insurance costs as well, I think that as Terry indicated, there is a risk there that if we don't have the proper equipment, underwriters are going to be taking a harder look at communities. I think it's coming. It's just my prediction. Thanks.
Okay, final questions or comments? Okay, it's been a while. Heather, can you read that the motion?
I will read what I have. Director Roth, correct me if I don't have everything. That the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors delay the purchase of Type 1 tactical water tender for 3 years and direct staff to extend the life of engine 51. Thank you.
Do you want to just read that out then, Heather, just so everyone's clear?
Okay.
That the Board of Directors pause actioning the purchase of a new fire truck. And that the Board of Directors direct staff to find cost-effective ways to maximize the lifespan of the present truck, engine 51, as set out in the fire underwriter's service schedule for fire apparatus for fire insurance grading purposes. So delaying the purchase of the fire truck for 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone's clear on the motion? Director Sparrow.
Thank you. So the way that motion reads, in 3 years, they can order the fire truck, or are they gonna come back to the board? Just for clarity.
Our process would regardless to be to come back to the board. And when we build up the budget, we always identify the capital purchases identified for that year as well. So you would see it twice. You'd see it when the budget's being established for that year, that fiscal year, and you'd see it after the tenders have been received in the similar way that you have now.
Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Director Roth, I'm wondering if you would consider a friendly amendment with respect to up to 3 years as opposed to a hard 3 years to provide some flexibility similar to what Director Boyko had talked about, if there was an opportunity to purchase something, if the prices went down, if there was something available, et cetera, et cetera. I'll stop there. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking the reason we chose, or I changed my mind to 3 was because 5 years puts it right to the end. So we needed that time, 18 months to 2 years to actually make the purchase. So that's why I said the 3. If you say up to 3, there might be too much. I don't know. I'm not sure. You think it would work?
I think that's a good amendment, Director Beckett. It gives some flexibility to staff to take advantage of any potential timings. And whatever happens in the next 3 years, who knows? Things got really cheap at the start of the pandemic last year for 2020.
I'd certainly be in favor of it then.
Okay, and as a second, you're amenables to that as well? Okay. So the amendment is up to 3 years, so we vote on the amendment first? Okay, so there has been an amendment to change the motion for up to 3 years. All in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? Motion carried. So now we're going to vote on the motion. Director Cote?
With regard to the motion, knowing that in 6 months, the cost is going to be already increased by $60,000. Can we have reports back as to the increases? Because I'm sure that we'll be seeing those costs being, identified by other communities that are buying trucks. And from our fire departments, if we could have a idea as to how the increases are going to affect us. Maybe, I don't know, annually or whatever, because or in 6 months, we might be able to tell that in another 6 months, it'll be another 60,000. Seems to me it's like $100,000 a year. Thanks.
Seeing no final questions or comments, all in favor of the motion? Okay, you got it. Okay, any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Okay, good discussion. Next for request for decision is Spark BC Local Community Accessible Grant, and this is Heather's going to speak to this. Thank you.
So today I'm asking the board to support a grant application to Spark BC. The purpose of the grant is to secure funding for staff training on accessibility, including customer service training, communication training, accessible meeting and community events, and training for managers. I did meet yesterday with the accessibility committee. As to apply for this grant, we do need a letter of support from that committee. They were supportive of the grant, but we did not have quorum at the meeting, so we are meeting with them again next week to secure that letter of support. I'm asking the board to pass the resolution as presented, but subject to receiving a letter of support from the accessibility committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Would anyone like to make that motion? Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Johnson. Questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next request for decision, Next Generation 911 TELUS Local Government Agreement, and that's going to be Eddie Kunderman. Please go ahead, Eddie.
I believe that's me.
Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, before you is the agreement with TELUS for Next Gen 911. This is a federal initiative, and it requires the Alberta Clay Clark Regional District to sign an agreement with TELUS as the backbone provider for 911 service. I'll just bring you up to date that as of this time, we are one of 12 that regional districts that has not signed the agreement. And we are being asked, we're being told actually that the agreement must be signed by January of 2025. No option. The federal government is imposing this, where they go from here. That being said, this agreement has gone through many reiterations and has been vetted many times, both by legal and other regional districts. And I think we've come up to agreement that we can sign. The initial agreement had us request that we provided GIS data that we did not have. We've now got that agreement in place with other partner communities here, and we can move forward. So I recommend the approval of this agreement.
Daniel.
I'm just going to add that one of the original reasons for not signing, Charlie had indicated, was the responsibility for addressing. That is being addressed, no pun intended. But the other was the fact that there was a jurisdictional issue with regard to representation of the First Nations, which was really outside of our jurisdiction legally. And as a result of that, this revised agreement, correctly recognizing that it's the province who's establishing agreements with the nations with regard to 911. And so that distinction is important in terms of making sure that liability sits where liability belongs and that relationships are properly aligned. This does not mean that we're stopping our work on the GIS addressing with all nations. We are doing that together, but this foundational agreement respects that our jurisdiction is one of local governance versus when we talk about the nations, the jurisdiction is really a different level of government to government, and it's the province with the First Nations that are in this region.
Thank you, Director Beckett and Director Boyko. Please go ahead, Director Beckett.
Thank you. As the board's representative on North Island 911 Corporation, I will make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve entering into the Next Generation 911 Local Government Services Agreement with TELUS Communications, Inc., and that the CAO be authorized to negotiate and execute the agreement on behalf of the ACRD.
Thank you. Moved by Director Beckett, seconded by Director Coots. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. Just so everyone is aware, BC is launching, as of 6 days ago, an independent review of 911 services due to complaints on cost and transparency. So that is ongoing now. So just so people are aware. Thank you.
Director Beckett.
Yeah, I just want to add so that we're not blending the two. You're absolutely right, Director Boyko. But that review is for ECOM out of Vancouver. So I think it's and I would concur that it's a valuable evaluation given some of the challenges they've had in the past. But this is a different matter.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Request for decision, Banfield Submarine Waterline Replacement Design Review and Construction Services. Now, Eddie, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. I was a little bit scared there at the last one. I was not prepared to speak to the 911. This one we have staff as a recommendation to award the Banfield Submarine Waterline Replacement Contract to Fraser Burrard Diving Limited for the amount of $1,020,843, excluding GST, plus a 10% project contingency. And then authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the contract on behalf of the ACRD. And also that we are requesting the ACRD Board of Directors send a letter to the Department of Fishery and Oceans to expedite the permitting process for the waterline replacement, allowing for that construction before the summer of 2025. So this project has been ongoing. We are now at the 50% design portion. And at this point, we're looking to bring on the contractor. We had 2 applicants, and Fraser Burrard Diving Limited was the top proponent. They have extensive experience in this line of work. We're the clear choice. So they will be working on pre-construction services, working with the project engineers, Great Pacific Engineering, on the design, taking it from 50% to 100%. And then at that point, negotiating based off the submitted cost at this point for the 100% finalized design. With the secondary portion of that recommendation, we have to go through an authorization process through the DFO under the Fisheries Act, based primarily around eelgrass beds in the area. So we're working on going through that process, which can carry a time frame of up to 5 to 6 months. We're hoping just that with letters of support from the ACRD board and Huu-ay-aht First Nations, that we'll be able to ensure the expedition of this project, as they are aware of the necessity of making this replacement as soon as possible. When we look at the contract values and the financial portion, we are looking, and we did include within the 2024 financial plan, Community Works funding to make up the difference of the contract overruns. We have budgeted about $360,000 in the 2024 financial plan. So we are hoping to use that for any shortfalls. Of course, this project does align with strategic priority 1.5. And we're hopefully, as next steps, requesting the board to approve the recommendation so we can move forward, send the letter to expedite the DFO permit. And then if the board would like further information of the contract prior to deciding, then the full contract could be brought forward in camera at the next scheduled meeting. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Beckett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to move the motion in just a moment, but I did want to comment that both our water contractor, Mr. Butler, and the chair of the Banfield Community Affairs reached out to me today and they're very concerned about the reliability, as we all know, of the submarine line. And their appeal to me today was, how do we ensure that we get this done before the summer? We can't afford to have an incident this summer, given the height of our tourist business and the challenges associated with a water repair. And specifically, they drew circles around the DFO and the challenges or the historical perspective relating to getting the permitting in place can be lengthy. So this is more of a comment versus a question, but I guess I'm wondering if we need to be proactive and have our member of parliament help us with motivating DFO on this. But I'll leave that to staff to consider. I'll go ahead with the motion and we can continue to discuss this if need be. I'll make the motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the Banfield Submarine Waterline Replacement Design Review and Construction Services contract to Fraser Burrard Diving Limited in the amount of $1,020,843, excluding GST, plus a 10% project contingency and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the contract on behalf of the ACRD. That would be the first motion.
Moved by Director Beckett, second by Director Coots. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Would you like to read the next motion as well, Director Beckett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors sends a letter to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans requesting the expedition of the permit for the West Banfield submarine waterline replacement to allow for construction to occur before summer 2025.
Moved by Director Beckett, second by Director Sparrow. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Request for decision, disaster. Oh, Director Jack?
Sorry, I got a new headset. I'd like to add a motion to this to the effect of, I'd like to move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors send a letter to Minister Leboutillier of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans explaining the issue surrounding the Bamfield waterline replacement and the need for expediting that. And I'd like to CC Gord Johns as well as maybe Huayet as well. And as a second part of the motion, I'd like to ask that Huayet send a letter of support to that effect as well. We just had a good meeting with the minister, like literally 20 minutes ago. So I think we'll be front of mind if we can work together on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by Director Jack, seconded by Director Beckett. Any questions or comments? All in favor of that motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so now we'll move to the next request for decision, disaster emergency management plan update. Karen, please go ahead.
Thank you and good afternoon. Recently, the ACRD Disaster and Emergency Management Plan was updated to incorporate key policy changes in the new legislation and to reflect the ACRD bylaw PS 1012. On November the 6th, the plan was presented to the ACRD Emergency Executive Committee for their recommendation. After discussion, the committee recommended the adoption of the plan with the requested amendments. The changes have been made, so before you is a recommendation to adopt the ACRD Disaster and Emergency Management Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions or comments for Karen? Director Boyko.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So at the last board meeting, November 27th, we had item 12A. We made a motion after our recent weather event that affected most of the regional areas for extended power outages to include in the emergency planning I'm just going to read this exactly. Emergency supplies by residents to include an alternative source of heat, be it wood stove or other something else, generator, fuels, and chainsaws. I think we should add that into our emergency plan. All it says is grab your emergency kit, turn on the radio right now, and make that more useful and friendly for the actual public. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. We do have a lot of messages that we send to the public that aren't in the emergency plan before you. Those are a separate a section that we have for preparedness and social media updates and graphics that we're constantly changing and modifying and updating to reflect what's best for the community. So those are separate to the actual plan before you. And that is also something that we'll be working on refining in the crisis communication plan that we're looking to start in the new year to pre-develop some of those key messages that we'll be saying to the public. So in a flood, this is what you do. During a warning or an alert, these are the actions you take. So those will be the types of things that we're really going to flush out in the crisis communication plan when we're talking about public facing information, if that's helpful.
No, I think that helps out. The message to have something when power goes out for 4 days, that's not something you can send out to someone that's already lost power and internet. They need to have these supplies in place beforehand, have your fuel stabilized, et cetera, et cetera. So sending it out on a voyant alert is not really the way to go. We need to make sure that people are prepared in the future moving forward and have that in our messaging. If it's not going to be in this document, it needs to be on the website that says have your emergency kit, not just linked to the provincial kit that doesn't mention any of those items that we've already agreed in this boardroom that need to be in there. Thank you.
Dr. Jack.
Yeah, I have a question through the chair. First time I've said that in a while. Is the crisis communication plan, is that something where we could add those things? So we may have just thought to put it in the wrong plan. Could we just do a motion to amend that motion to send it to the crisis communication plan? Because it sounds like that will be the framework for all the different types of communication we do. Not just voyant alert, hopefully. Is that the case? And then we'll be able to do pre-communication to get people ready.
I can speak to the communication plan would be a great plan to have some of that information in there. It is the plan that we will be thinking that guides our public communication. And to just echo what's being said, you're absolutely right. During an emergency is not the time to start thinking about generators and some of these things. And our public messaging and public preparedness messaging is an ongoing year-round activity that we do, and the decision that was made in the board to include items such as generators is certainly something that can be added into our public messaging and in our crisis communication plan. As far as how to redirect the motion, I'm not sure. I might have to defer to yourselves on that.
Heather, I don't know what the motion would be. Would it be referencing that motion, or would it just be a new motion adding it to the communications plan?
I think Daniel wants to speak.
Okay, sorry.
I think a motion to add those details to our communication planning, but also to ensure that we add it as an update to our emergency preparedness information piece on the website. Because we can do the website right away. The communication plan, obviously, we're going to be working through in 2025. And I think the intent here is not, this isn't complex. This is just a 3-point addition that helps people make sure that they're prepared with further 72 hours plus, really, which is the reality that we're facing today. So I think a motion deferring it to the communications and immediately updating our website would be appropriate.
Okay, so we have a motion. Would anybody like to second that? Moved by Director Jack, second by Director Boyko. Everyone's clear on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We also have a motion on that the Alberta Cape Regional District Board of Directors adopt the updated disaster emergency management plan as presented. Anybody like to make that motion? Moved by Director Johnson, second by Director Sparrow. You have a question?
I do, thank you. I remember going through a course recently, and then your response plan, item 5, I believe, it says protect government infrastructures. And the one I went to said protect infrastructures. I know it's been debated back and forth on that line item, which one it is. I want to make sure that our emergency response plan aligns with provincial needs, so we don't inadvertently protect the wrong structures. When we say we're going to do government structures, we'll protect private infrastructure. We're not setting up for liability issues. So can we just make sure we have the right wording in the plan that is current for the plan? That's available. Thank you.
Director Jack?
I think one exception to that is the Banfield Road is technically private infrastructure. So I think that's something that may bear a separate consideration, but we can cross that road when we come to it. It's just as long as it's well known here and can be communicated on the website or on Canva posts, that kind of thing. Thanks.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, the reason it works is like for cell towers, they're private infrastructure, but they would be prioritized over houses around them. But our wording in our emergency plan says government infrastructure, which does not include cell phones or vital links. So just make sure we're on the same page as the province, that's all.
Did you want to say anything? Yeah.
I'll just say I agree, and it's a good point. And especially in a place like our regional district, where even some water systems are private but essential to large groups of citizens. These are all the key pieces of infrastructure that we would be prioritizing and paying attention to. So your point's well made. We'll make the adjustment.
Thank you. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Now we go to planning matters. This is for electoral area directors only. First is request for decision, interim housing needs report. Alex, did you want to say a few comments?
Thank you very much. So the interim housing needs reports for each of the 6 electoral areas are presented for the board's consideration. Jenna from McCullough Development Services and Andrew from Turner Drake and Partners provided all the background as a delegation, and I won't add much to their presentation. These are the interim reports that must be adopted by the board by January 1st to meet the legislation. Also, just quickly highlight that the regional district does intend to undertake the additional housing needs work over the next 6 months or so that will focus on more direct engagement with the area APCs, with community agencies and the broader public as a whole, with the intent to build upon these reports and undertake more comprehensive analysis that will target area specific needs within each community, and then those needs will be reflected in the OCP updates that are currently underway. So I'll leave it at that and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make that motion? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make the motion that the Alberta Claycott Regional District Board of Directors receive the interim housing needs report as presented. I got a comment.
Thank you. Moved by Director Boyko, second by Director Cote. And you had a comment.
Yes, the comment, when you look at the numbers based on what we're actually making and subdividing and building vertically and adding new housing in this ACRD electoral areas, it's very far-fetched and fanciful, and it's a fantasy, and I don't think we'll ever achieve it so I went through the BC government guidelines on the formulas that are used, and it's all well and good if you're in an area that you build vertically and you have lots of sewer and water structures, but we don't have all that. So I think they're nice numbers, but realistically, I don't think we'll ever achieve it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Let's see, Director Cote.
Thank you. I think that these are, we may never meet this, but I think it's something good to have it for our OCPs that we're developing so that we can make that opportunity available for any kind of development that comes our way. I think it's great. I'd love to see in the next 5 years, 125 new homes at Sprout Lake. I think it'd be great. Thanks.
One thing they did mention, it's not reaching the target, but what will be good for is an advocacy tool for trying to get amenities in your community and things like that. So I think that's a good tool. So seeing no other questions or comments, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is TUP 24009, Woodstock Hook Bay, Alberni Inlet, Banfield. Alex, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is a temporary use permit application for a property located on the Alberni Inlet, approximately 18 kilometers south of Port Alberni. The permit would allow for the operation of a portable sawmill and lumber processing use on a portion of Crown land that is already licensed to the applicants for dry land log sorting and scaling on the upland area and on the foreshore as well. The Banfield Advisory Planning Commission reviewed this application on November 28th, where they supported the application as it was presented. The permit allows for the addition of a sawmill use on land that is really already actively being used for log handling and processing, with good access to the Canal Main Forest Service Road. And the timeframe of the permit would align with the Crown license of occupation that's held by the applicants already. So as this property lies outside of an OCP area, it's a little bit more unique. The TUP must be issued by bylaw, which follows a public hearing process that will be similar to a rezoning application. So it is recommended at this point that the board give first reading to bylaw P1520, and that a public hearing be held, which would follow a First Nation and agency referral process. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Beckett, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to make the first motion that bylaw P1520, a bylaw to authorize issuance of a temporary use permit, be read a first time.
Moved by Director Beckett, second by Director Sparrow. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead, Director Beckett.
and that the public hearing for bylaw P 1520 be delegated to the director for electoral area A, the alternate director, or the chairperson of the regional district.
Moved by Director Beckett, second by Director Cote. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead, Director Beckett.
And finally, that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Board of Directors confirm that adoption of bylaw P 1520 is subject to meeting all technical referral agency requirements.
Moved by Director Beckett, second by Director Cote. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is TUP 24011 Alders A 8619 and 8623 Bland Road, Beaufort. Alex, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is a temporary use permit application for a property in the agricultural land reserve on Bland Road in the Beaufort area. The permit would allow for the short-term rental of an existing secondary home on the property. The owners have farm status on the parcel, and they intend to operate the rental as an agritourism accommodation use in compliance with the Agricultural Land Commission regulations that are in place. The Beaufort APC considered this TUP on November 21st, where the APC supported the application, and staff recommend that the board consider the TUP and proceed with the neighborhood notification and the public advertising process for the application.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Alex? Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a motion that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Board of Directors consider issuing TUP 24011, subject to confirmation by a registered on-site wastewater practitioner of adequate sewerage capability for the short-term rental use and neighbor notification as per Local Government Act, Section 499. Thank you.
Moved by Director Boyko, second by Director Roth. Any final questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is DVB 24011 Bowers 8445 Beaver Creek Road, Beaufort, Development Variance Application Report. Please go ahead, Alex.
Thank you very much. This development variance application would reduce the setback from a watercourse from 30 meters to 10 meters to allow for the construction of a new house on the vacant 1 acre property located on Beaver Creek Road. The Beaufort APC supported this application as well at their last meeting, and the creek variance has been supported by a qualified environmental professional already. So at this point, staff recommend that the board consider the application the first time and proceed with the public input process before making a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a motion that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Board of Directors consider issuing DVB 24011, subject to neighbor notifications as per Local Government Act, Section 499. Thank you.
Moved by Director Boyko, second by Director Roth. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is DVD 24013 Campbell 10861 Lakeshore Road, Sprout Lake, Development Variance Report and Permit. Alex, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This development variance relates to a property in the Sprout Lake area. It would reduce the minimum lot width in the RA1 zone by 4.9 meters to support a proposed 3-lot Bearland Strata subdivision. The board considered this application a first time on November 13th. The public input process has now been completed and no correspondence was received. Given the current disruption in the Canada Post Service, the regional district provided neighbor notification by a combination of hand delivery to the occupants and a courier service to the non-resident property owners within the 100-meter neighbor notification area. So the notice included the details on how to submit correspondence by email or in person here at the office, and it included the contact information for the planning department. With all of that, no questions or any correspondence was received, and at this time, staff recommend that the board issue the development variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cote, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you. I'd like to first say thank you to staff for reaching out to making sure that the surrounding neighbors were notified with the postal strike. I know it's a challenge. Also remembering that this property, I did ask about the foreshore opportunity to give access to the upland subdivision, and I'm hoping that the applicants will take that into consideration in the future. At this time, I would move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors issue development variance permit DVD 24013.
Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Sparrow. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is DVD 24012, Assen 99. Oh, I just read that one. Nope. Sunset Road, Sprout Lake, Development Variance Report and Permit. Alex, please go ahead.
Thank you. This variance application would allow for the construction of a single family dwelling on the property located on Sunset Road on the Spur Lake waterfront. The variance would reduce the side yard setbacks on both the north and the south sides on the relatively narrow 0.24 of a hectare lot to allow for the applicant's intended siting of the house on the property. The board considered this application again the first time on November 13th, subject to public input. The neighbor notification process was completed by a combination of hand delivery and courier, again, as I outlined previously. No correspondence was received on this one during the notice period, but I will highlight that the neighboring property owner to the south had previously submitted a letter of support, and that neighbor would be most impacted by the variance. So the board received that at the last meeting. And at this point, staff recommend that the board issue development variance DVD 24012. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Cote. Would you like to read the motion?
I would. Thank you. I would move that the Board of Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors issue development variance permit DVD 24012.
Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Sparrow. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda is RD 24009, Dermiller 5801 Syringa Road, Sprout Lake, rezoning report and bylaws. And Mike Erg is going to be speaking to this. Please go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. This is an application to rezone from Forest A3 district to Small Holdings A1 district to facilitate a proposed 3-lot subdivision. Lot 1 would be approximately 4 acres containing the existing single family dwelling, and outbuildings for proposed lots 2 and 3 would each be approximately 2.5 acres or 1 hectare. The rezoning application also includes a Sprout Lake official community plan amendment to redesignate the parcel from rural to residential use. This is a 9-acre property. It fronts on Syringa Road in a rural area of Sprout Lake. Neighboring parcels are mostly forested with minimal sightlines between the neighboring properties. A portion of the property was previously used for agricultural purposes as a blueberry farm, and approximately half of the property remains treed and partially cleared. I would note that the property is not within the agricultural land reserve. As an official community plan amendment is required, if this rezoning application moves forward, a public hearing would be required. And at this stage, it was reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission, and they recommended moving forward. And I would also recommend that the board proceed with first reading. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Cote.
Thank you. I also like to make a comment that it's nice to see a new line. I think it's new from the Advisory Planning Commission recommendations. I think that's new. Newish? Okay. Thank you. I'd like to see that there. Thanks. So at this time, I would make the recommendation that the bylaw P1515 Sprout Lake Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw be read a first time.
Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Sparrow. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead.
I move that bylaw P1516 Regional District Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw be read a first time.
Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Sparrow. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead.
I've moved that the public hearing for bylaws P1515 and P1516 be delegated to the Director for Electoral Area D, the alternate director, or the chairperson of the regional district.
Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Sparrow. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, any opposed, motion carried. Please go ahead.
I'd move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors confirm that adoption of bylaws P1515 and P1516 are subject to a confirmation from a registered on-site water waste practitioner, and that the parcel can accommodate on-site sewage disposal to a 0.8 hectare minimum lot size, and B, meeting all technical referral agency requirements.
Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Sparrow. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, any opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is TUP 24010 DG and 3 Holdings Limited, 4689, 4697 Dundalk Avenue South, Cherry Creek, temporary use permit, report and permit. Mike, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So this is the second part of the temporary use permit application. So the applicants have constructed a commercial and industrial complex with individual lease spaces on a light industrial M2 property. The 2 buildings were constructed on the property in 2024. And there are individual lease areas within the 2 buildings. In addition to small-scale industrial operators expressing interest in the lease, the applicants have also received interest from a number of commercial businesses looking for space. Some of the commercial uses would not comply with the current industrial zoning. As the board reviewed this application on November 13th and resolved to consider further, a public notification as per the local government has taken place. Notices and advertisements were sent out, as Alex previously discussed, how we're dealing with it in the postal strike. We have not received any feedback from any neighbors, and we recommend that the temporary use permit be issued. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Sparrow, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you. I'll make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors issue TUP 24010.
Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Roth. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion. Any opposed, motion carried. Now we're on to all directors. On the agenda is AB 24003 Bouchard 4625 Batty Road, Beaufort, Agricultural Land Commission application report. And this is Mike as well. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So the applicant is requesting a non-adhering residential use to live in their current house while they construct a new single-family dwelling unit on the property. As this property is in the agricultural land reserve, this application is required. The applicant's intent is to construct a 1,700 square foot home on the property and then decommission and or demolish the existing smaller home in accordance with the ALC policy for non-adhering residential uses. The Agricultural Advisory Committee reviewed this application and recommended that that the board support it and the application be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Director Boyko, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Chair. This is widely accepted by the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Make a motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors forward ALC application AB Alpha Bravo 24003 to the Agricultural Land Commission for decision. Thank you.
Moved by Director Boyko, second by Director Roth. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion. Any opposed, motion carried. Next is AD 24002 Sahin 7825 McCoy Lake Road, Sprout Lake, Agricultural Land Commission application report. Mike, please go ahead.
Thank you. So in this application, the applicant is applying for the Agricultural Land Commission to subdivide the western most forested areas of the subject parcel into 6 rural lots, and further subdivide the easternmost portion of the property along McCoy Lake Road, sort of along separating where the property is bisected by McCoy Lake Road. The Agricultural Advisory Committee did review this application at their meeting, and And the committee voted unanimously not to support the application, citing the agricultural capabilities of the forested areas for cattle and the net loss to agriculture that the proposed subdivision represents. So at this stage, the board has two options. You can resolve to forward the application to the Agricultural Land Commission for their decision, or the other option would be to deny the application. If the board denies the application, I would note that it would not go to the Agricultural Land Commission as per the Agricultural Land Commission Act. Please, and I also would like the board to note that the current policy when the board's considering denying an application is to defer any decision and invite the applicants to come and speak before the board makes any motion, and that motion is in the report, and I will read it. What that motion would be, I'll read it out for the board, that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors is at this time disposed to deny this Agricultural Land Commission application. Prior to doing so, the board wishes to offer the applicant the opportunity to present their own case as to why this matter should be supported. And at this stage, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Director Cote, what is your preference?
I would make the motion, I'll second Mr. Erg's motion. I'll make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors is at this time disposed to deny this Agricultural Land Commission application. Prior to doing so, the board wishes to offer the applicant the opportunity to present their own case as to why this matter should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by Director Cote, second by Director Boyko. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Request for decision, Agriculture Development Committee meeting terms of reference update. And that will be Mike as well.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. The Agricultural Development Committee reviewed their terms of reference at their November 12th, 2024 meeting, which contained proposed changes to assist the committee with meeting quorum requirements and advancing its business. And it made a motion to forward on the amended terms of reference to the board of directors. So the Agricultural Development Committee, supports these changes. And just a brief summary of what those changes are to make paid staff members into ex officio non-voting members on the committee. So there are staff members from other agencies and governments that do sit on the committee, keep producers and marine members and not-for-profit organization representatives as voting members, and allow voting members to appoint an alternate that may vote in their place if they cannot attend the meeting. And then finally, to move the meeting from monthly over to for monthly meetings, which have been taking place on Zoom, to quarterly meetings in person, and provide the hybrid option as well, and to keep the option for the chair to call additional meetings if needed. And it is recommended that the board adopt the ADC terms of reference. And as always, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mike? Would somebody like to make the motion? Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. Make a motion that the ACRD Board of Directors adopt the Agricultural Development Committee terms of reference as presented.
Moved by Director Boyko, second by Director Roth. Any final questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Was that a question, Director Cote, or you're just raising your hand? Okay, let's get through the next couple of things and we'll take a break. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have staff reports. Meeting scheduled for January 2025. Sounds so weird. Building report for November 2024. Monthly agreement and grant allocation report, November 1st or November 30th, 2024. An official community plan updates Area C background research report for December 2024. Does anybody want to speak on anything under reports? Director Cote.
Thank you. So item D, official community plan updates, Area C background research report. I think it's quite extensive. I think that it's great to see all the information in there. I can't wait to see what comes out for Area D in the near future. So great job. Yeah, it's really interesting. And seeing the time frame of what's coming next, where we're at. So how will this be proposed out to the community by poster? Now that there's no mail, it's a bit of a challenge. So that's my question. Thanks.
Mike, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the information is on Let's Connect. We have had one pop-up event at the co-op in Ucluelet, just sharing information. We are providing handouts, business cards, etc. With QR codes that link to the Let's Connect page, and been establishing an email list so that people can be emailed and kept up to date as to where we are at the project. The next stage of the project will really be to get into working on the visioning components of the OCP, and again with the Advisory Planning Commission being the lead on that project. And so I think that briefly summarizes it. And with all of the OCP projects, we will be bringing them for regular updates to the board of directors as information reports, and as required, we will also be updating the electoral area director committees if we need to have more in-depth discussion and regular meetings with the advisory planning commissions. Hopefully that answers your question.
Dr. Cote?
Thank you. It seems to be a real challenge because so many people are absentee owners, absentee people. So hopefully this postal strike will not be extending too long, so that we can actually reach those people if they don't reach out, looking at our website or yeah, I'm not quite sure how to get that out, because they're not going to be at those pop-up events or yeah, it's going to be a challenge. Thank you.
Did you have your hand up, Director Boyko?
I think reliance on a website and people to go check it on a regular basis is not going to be very effective in public engagement. Even as a director, I go on there every couple of days, and that's a little bit strange, but that being said, I don't read the news stuff on the side because really I don't care. I'm looking at agendas and what's coming up and all that kind of good stuff. But having a pop up in that, we need to think of a better way to have community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're the Director Siga, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd just like to commend the crew that's working on the OCP for a job really well done. We really felt included. Myself as director and the area planning committee. And I was just wondering if perhaps through the chair to Mike, a way to ensure all of the people are aware of accessing the plan as it progresses on the website, if a link can be put in with the utility bill as added to that little flyer.
Yes, we certainly can do that. And I think it's in the works.
Thank you. Okay, can I get a motion that the Board of Directors receive the staff reports A through D? Moved by Director Coots, seconded by Director Boyko. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is committee reports. Accessibility Committee meeting December 10th, 2024. Director Siga, can you give a verbal report? You're on mute, Beta.
Sorry about that. If I go to look at my notes, I press down on the space bar and I make all kinds of spaces. It was a really excellent meeting yesterday. There were insightful contributions on accessibility concerns at Sprout Lake. And the Sprout Lake Parks and Recreation presented information on the status and roles of park staff and awareness of accessibility issues and challenges to addressing these issues. Parking of large vehicles and boat trailers at the day use area is a problem, as it's the only lot with access to a beach at Sprout Lake. Vehicles often park in the only designated handicap space and often park for several days at a time. the Sprout Lake Parks and Recreation identified that parking is an ongoing issue at this lot, and an enforceable approach to managing it needs to be determined. A recommendation was made that the handicap parking be identified by signage visible from parked cars rather than just on the pavement, and monitor the handicap parking to ensure vehicles in the designated spaces have a handicap placard, and the Spark staff on site are not parking enforcement attendants, and they already experience harassment. So perhaps, I don't know, this is just me saying that perhaps our CMT could provide insight on management. There are accessible tables at Sprout Lake, but they are not located where the handicap access is easy. And the Sprout Lake Parks Recreation manager spoke of relocating these tabletops to the accessible day use area, which is more accessible. And decisions regarding the handicap parking and accessibility adaptations at BC Parks are made through the BC Parks Accessibility Committee. And there was a recommendation to the ACRD Board of Directors. Oh, I would like to make a recommendation to the ACRD Board of Directors to share the input of our Accessibility Committee on needed changes and improvements at the Sprout Lake Provincial Park to improve accessibility. And I'd like to put that forward as a motion. Thanks.
Dr. Cote. Oh, moved by Director Siga, second by Director Cote. Any questions or comments on the motion? Director Cote.
Thank you. Just a question about who was bringing forward the Sprout Lake issues. Was it the provincial park?
Other?
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was a member of the public that brought the issues forward, and the Sprout Lake Parks. Oh, Heather, help. They spoke very eloquently about it, so I'll let Heather explain. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as part of the accessibility committee, I was approached by a member of the public who shared some concerns with accessing Sprout Lake. So at our last committee meeting, we made a resolution to invite the BC Park staff who came yesterday and heard direct feedback from this member of the public, but also from our accessibility committee members. They were very open to receiving input. So like Director Siga has put forward a motion to share some of this feedback with the BC Parks Accessibility Committee. So I think that's a good step for the board to take in advocacy.
Director Cote.
So will we be getting the minutes from this in our next agenda, or? Okay, thank you.
And so seeing no further questions or comments, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Director Siga. Next, area reports, Electoral Area A, Banfield, Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've already heard about the water line project and how desperately we're wanting to move that forward. And with staff support, I know that I feel very confident that we will see that installed before our busy summer. And lastly, I, along with ACRD staff, will be doing a follow-up with Banfield Community Affairs Society Executive tomorrow to critique the Banfield sewer referendum process. And as a reminder, I mentioned that before, that's an opportunity to take a look at what we did well and what we could improve upon. So I look forward to that, and that is my report.
Thank you. Electoral Area B, Beaufort, Director Boyko. I think after reports are done, we'll do a break.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. Beaufort's doing good. People have mostly recovered from the storm 2-3 weeks ago. There's lots of firewood being cut and prepared for next year. Town hall meeting, next one, March 2nd, 2024, Beaver Creek Hall, 2 p.m. We'll having some financial discussions with the public and see what they want to pay for and what they don't. In preparation for the financial discussion upcoming, every municipality and district in British Columbia is having challenges with financing. So everywhere is looking at cutting services, including the city of Port Alberni and everywhere else. So difficult decisions will need to be made. We will need to have chats about modifications to the strategic plan, things like this. Do we need to have satellite imagery? Do we need to have little additional trails added, things like this that we can postpone or remove entirely? Are we going to implement airport landing fees? Are we actually going to collect airport parking fees? Things like this. So we're going to have some serious talks about that moving forward because the challenges of tax increases to the public are large. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Electoral Area C, Long Beach Director Siga.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Thank
you.
you very much. Okay, yeah. I am on the opposite end of the spectrum from Director Boyko. We are having issues with our water system. It's under the system that was put in. I wonder how it could possibly have passed. And apparently because it was on private land, the regulations don't seem to have been applied to the creation of the water system. We have an excellent water source, but as opposed to not wanting to create infrastructure or build new additions to infrastructure, I'm in a position where I think we really need to look at ensuring the security of our infrastructure for our water and for water for fire protection. And yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic where I am looking forward to supporting projects. And yeah, thank you for.
Thank you. We'll circle back to Director Cote. Electoral Area E, Beaver Creek Director Roth.
Thank you. Pretty much everything's going well. I haven't heard much from people in Beaver Creek other than people talking a lot about what's happening with Sand Group and a lot of fear about job losses in the community. So I think it might be a tough year coming up for people. So we've got to make sure that we don't overspend and are very wise about our decisions. I'd also like to introduce Harley Wiley here. He's my new alternate director. And he's also an elected leader with Tishat First Nations. Thanks, Harvey. And thank you.
Thank you. Electoral Area F, Cherry Creek Director Sparrow.
Been pretty quiet on Cherry Creek so far into the end of the year. I think 2025, you'll hear that too, where's Cherry Creek a lot, depending on what happens with their conversion study and the results of that. They are going through some building processes out there, and we'll see how that impacts the region out there. But right now, it's just a quiet area waiting for New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Port Alberni, Director Minions.
Hey everyone, a few things to report. Firstly, some positive news. It was reported to City Council a few days ago that we now have 17 lifeguards working at our pool. Our staff have been working incredibly hard, going through the process to train new lifeguards. Several of those are casual, but we have also filled our full-time positions. And the casuals, we will be over the next few months looking to see how the hours kind of work out. And we are just awaiting a report coming to council in January on how we can make later Saturday night and Sunday service open again at the pool. So our staff do feel that we now have enough lifeguards to do that. We've also opened up a huge amount of swim lessons as well. So really happy about that and appreciate our recreation manager and director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage and the progress they've made on that, as we know it's been a real challenge training that many lifeguards and making sure that we're going to have adequate work for them as well. We, like everyone else, are working on our budget right now. And as Director Boyko said, we are looking at potential cuts and challenges as well. You know, I want to, I think, appreciate the comments just made by Director Siga. While I definitely do feel we need to look for cuts at the city, and we are evaluating the service levels, we are also looking at some really important projects that we need to invest in. So it's always a balancing act. And I think it's important for us to all remember that costs are high and we have to do the best we can to meet all of the needs of our community. And that includes investing in our community long term as well. And I will just say on Sand Group, because I know that's been a big concern in the community, the city has activated with the jointly with the province, the community transition team to support workers of the Sand Group who are out of work as a result of the recent news. The provincial team will work with them to make sure workers are taken care of, to offer retraining and to connect them with services. And once we have a better understanding of exactly what's going to be going on, they will support the community and potential tax loss and other discussions as well. And lastly, I will just really briefly give my report on the Chamber since I have to step out for a moment. Sorry about that. And that is just that the Chamber of Commerce is also working on their budget right now, as well as working on a longer term plan for the Alberni Pacific Railway and McLean Mill. And of course, they're working on that jointly with the city. So we're looking forward to seeing what they come up with. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add that the city is in the middle of their by-election. The first advance poll was held last week. The second advance poll is today. And the final date for voting for our new councillor will be on Saturday. So 5 people are running, so it'll be interesting to see who's going to be part of our team. Justice of Tofino, Director Steer.
Yes, thank you. Quick report, just to carry on with the theme that was going on between Director Minions and Director Boyko in terms of those investments in communities and infrastructure, which leads into my report where we have yesterday at council meeting went over some of the major projects that have been completed, and it was quite amazing the amount of work that's been completed in 2024. We've replaced a number of water mains at the same time, capitalizing on some sidewalk infrastructure that coexisted with that to access our school and our community hall. Upgrades to the school ball fields, new ball diamonds. Of course, you may have heard brand new wastewater treatment plant, upgrades to the pickleball courts, et cetera, So a lot of those important projects that we had to prioritize and to add to the discussion around the financing of those. And you're absolutely right. The tasks of the taxpayer to do this, we know is increasing exponentially. And what we need to look at is those alternative forms of financing. And I think I heard things like pay parking, something that Tofino has adopted and has been successful in generating revenues that we can apply to some of those projects there. So we're looking at ways of increasing services in ways that are not a quote a burden to the taxpayer or an obligation to the taxpayer. Some other good news, we had our Christmas with Santa on the weekend, and it was probably the most well-attended breakfast that we have. This year was exponentially so, about 300 participants. And I'll just say, for many years, I've been lobbying to be Santa. I'm still not there yet. For some reason, I'm not going to ask why. I always get to have to be an elf. But anyways, I'm just saying, I'm still lobbying hard for the Santa thing. It was incredibly well-attended, and it was a joy to do once again. And that's it.
Thank you. District of Ukiwit, Director McEwen.
Thank you. We had a budget presentation last night from our Chief Financial Officer. He is moving forward exponentially on our 2025 to 2029 financial plan. So we had the update last night for operational and capital budgets, and he's even gone so far as to come up with some tax implications, including capital reserves. Last year, we voted to put $1 million away in capital reserves to fix our aging infrastructure. This year, last year it worked out to a fairly substantial tax increase for our residents. So this year we heard that everybody understood why we had to put money away in a capital reserve, but this year we're going to do a little bit less than that, maybe 750,000. We want to keep the tax rate no higher than 10% this year. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Hawaiian First Nations, Director Jack.
Thank you. So we're still plugging away on the Hawaiian framework plan, and we expect to see a first final draft in the next month or so. So we'll either be reviewing it at our last meeting before the 20th or sometime in the new year. I think also, and very importantly, the Umixu Mother Center will be coming online and operational on January 1st, which is a Wednesday, I think. And so that's a huge endeavor. That's the culmination of a lot of work that has been undertaken by Huu-ay-aht in service of Indigenous Nuu-chah-nulth specifically, with a few spaces reserved for Huu-ay-aht citizens. A co-effort between Huu-ay-aht, the provincial government, the federal government, the city of Port Alberni, and the Tshot First Nation, Hupatchisitt First Nation, in regards to making this happen. So for those of you who might not know, the Umixu Mother Center is modeled on the Aboriginal Mother Center in Vancouver, in the East End. And what it is a place for women and children who are in bad domestic situations to go and get on their feet. And so this is important because this is a part of keeping families together, because single mothers or mothers who have fled bad domestic situations are often subject to more scrutiny and often subject to having their children apprehended. That's something we want to prevent as well as help rectify. Then the Umixu Mother Center is a foundation for mothers and children to get on their feet and build a life. And it breaks a lot of the misogyny and a lot of the patriarchal systems that exist in silence in many Indigenous communities, and helps address a lot of those considerations as well. I want to thank everyone involved in the creation and the work that's being done on this, including our senior staff, as well as specifically our own Deputy Chief Counselor Edward Johnson, who's been a champion of this since it was conceived, as well as the mayor and council of the city of Port Alberni being so supportive on making sure that this happens. So we expect that if this thing can operate for 10 to 20 years, it will move the needle on a lot of outcomes for children in our community, especially reducing the vulnerable ones. There's a lot of other things I could talk about at Huu-ay-aht. I think the only thing I'll end off on is that the Sand Group situation specifically concerns Huu-ay-aht as well. We want to be a part of a solution. The ACRD is a part of an interregional working group on natural resources. So I've just sent a few nudge emails to see if we can reactivate, to see what we can do as members of the island as well. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tok'wat Nation, Director Johnson.
Afternoon. Tok'wat had our December People's Assembly last weekend, and we presented our draft strategic plan to the citizens, and we hope to get feedback from them, and hopefully in March it'll be adopted. Other than that, I think that's all I can report on right now.
Thank you very much. Utoq'asit Tribe Government, Director Coots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quite a short report as well. We are kind of just finishing up with some tuck-in, getting ready for the holidays and giving our staff some wonderful time off. Utoq'asit would like to raise our hands to Huu-ay-aht and all the other user groups who have put this together. It's a wonderful, it's a beautiful circumstance. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to take a look at what the amazing benefits that we can create when we come together to work on things together as the region. And we just, it's beautiful to see, especially in my teachments. It's lovely. And yes, we also had a lovely Christmas gathering. It was great to see all the kids together, and it's nice to be able to spend some time away from the desk and get with the people. Clico, Chu.
Thank you. Utoq'asit Government, Director Mastrangelo has lost her voice. She is online, but we won't make her speak because she has lost her voice. So we'll circle back to Clory RED, Sprout Lake, Director Cote.
Thank you. Sprout Lake is getting ready to, I guess, once again say goodbye to the Philippine Mars. It attempted to leave today, but I hear it's gone back to the lake for a review, I guess. We'll find out what happened there. That is the final Martin Mars plane that's going to be leaving our community forever. So bittersweet. knowing that it's gonna be preserved. And I've been to the Hawaii Mars down in Victoria and Sydney to see it there, and it's wonderful. People absolutely love it there. And it's nice that it's close. We can actually visit it when we want. The Sprout Lake Community Association is going through some changes. The chair has resigned today due to health reasons, so there'll be a change there. I guess the first vice will step up. In the meantime, their elections are coming February, the end of February, beginning of March, same time as relatively as the Sprout Lake community receives a presentation from the regional district. I have for many years asked the staff to come and present the budget and review on all of the services that Sprout Lake is provided. Also, anything to do with from Mosaic logging practices, the community forest, which is also at Sprout Lake, the broom busters. We get a full report on what's happened over the year. I usually have a volunteer appreciation event that I host, but this year I'll be having it after the new year because of my injury. So I'm finding it a little difficult to do things. And I think that's about it for Sprout Lake these days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Getting a motion that Board of Directors receive the area reports. Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is member reports. 911 Corporation Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very, very quick. We did look at our budget moving forward for 2025, and it looks like at this point in time, it's about 8%. I did identify and shared the board's concerns with respect to, increases such as that. The good news is that the projected increases for 26 to 29 would be in the range of 5%. There was an increase in 11% call volume. Fridays and Saturdays are still the busiest. And if you get hurt, avoid between 3 and 5 o'clock during those 2 days, because that's the busiest time for fire department and the ambulances. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Vancouver Island Regional Library Director Boyko. Oh, you? Sorry. Director
Yes,
Cote.
the new appointment happens in 2025.
Thank you.
So I did have a meeting last week and talked about the new library in Tassus. And Fred Boyko, this is after 8 years, you have to time out. So he's the vice chair. He's out. It was good to see everybody. And so next year.
Yeah. You do report. Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
I just want to thank Director Cote for her many, many, many years of service with Vancouver Island Regional Library Board. Thank you. We've done the Chamber of Commerce, so next is Air Quality Council, Director Sparrow.
Thank you for that. So the Air Quality Council, they've been doing their radio public service announcements from July to January. The subject, of course, is going to be do-it-yourself building air cleaners. And the listeners are directed to contact the AQC webpage to the ACRD website, covering how to create safe air zones for home during a smoke event, so they can do their own respirator things. Other important information. This is probably good this time of year with the amount of slash burning going on from private people, and also the amount of wood stoves going on, how to build your own air cleaners. And advocacy. In recent weeks, the AQC has had informative communication with Managed Forest Council Director Ann Donaldson. The MFC is involved in ensuring compliance with the Private Managed Forest Land Act and conduct inspections on mosaic lands every year. And they've done over 400 inspections over the last 8 years, including lands within the ACRD. And although they don't do slash pile burning, they do cover other environmental issues such as water quality in streams, soil erosion, and related land management practices in use by Mosaic and other enterprises. So as we continue looking at current practices by the forest industry, it may be beneficial to compare the contrast and how vigorously the OBSR, open burn search control regulation guidance is applied to managed lands in the ACRD. And as Mosaic has already said this year, they haven't been slash burning so far. So it'll be interesting to see the results in the spring of what this looks like this year as compared to other years for their quality control. That's all I have in my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, Director Cote.
Thank you. So we're having our meeting this Friday. That YouTube recording is still available from Tracy Lawrenson. It's excellent. I recommend everybody take a look at it. It's a follow-up from AVICC presentation that she did. And that was our advocacy work. Our next advocacy work will be on the legislative reform. Looking forward to that. This Friday, we'll be talking about convention planning. And I'd like to put a call out. If anybody knows any students that would be, you would like to refer forward to attending the AVICC, we'll be paying up to 50% of their travel costs. And I guess hotel, whatever. There's a limit, and I can't remember if it's 1,000, 2,000, something like that per student. The local government would be responsible for the attendance of that student, but I think it's wonderful opportunity. We had a student at the last AVICC who actually got up and presented at the end and talked about the opportunity that they had participating with the AVICC. At UBCM, there was also one of the executive brought her child to the convention, and I can see the growth that happens in their minds when they attend these events. Looking at future, the youth are our future, so really would like to make sure that there's somebody that if there is somebody in our community that would like to attend, that we would support that. Also, we've still have some funding left for reconciliation, working with First Nations. So we've decided that what we're doing is inviting First Nation, the chief or a representative, to pay their admission to AVICC to attend the event, the convention, with that funding. So we've had 3 First Nations at our last convention that attended, and seems to be very well received. The comments that we get back are that the First Nations are learning and see that this is an opportunity to work with our local governments and finding out through our resolutions process and our learning sessions that there's great value there. Thanks.
Thank you. Tawaska Public Advisory Group, Dr. Sparrow.
No report at this time. Hopefully the next meeting will be February or March. Thank you.
Any other reports from directors? Get a motion that the Board of Directors receive the member reports, moved by Director Coots, seconded by Director Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No unfinished business, no late business. Is there any questions online, Heather? From the public? Just one moment while I check.
There's nothing in email. And nothing in Zoom.
Can I have a motion to recess the regular Board of Directors meeting in order to conduct the Regional Hospital District meeting? Moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And I'd like to take about a 2-minute recess and so we can stretch your legs. You have still a bit of business to do. I'm not going to say 5 because it's getting late in the day. You get 2 minutes. Thank you.
Director Steer, I sent you a little note. I don't know if you read it or if I offended you, but it was sent in the Christmas spirit.
Did you send it to my email to the?
No, it was on the chat.
Oh, I got to get good on this chat stuff.
I miss them half the time too.
I don't have it here.
Oh,
yeah, there we are.
Someday you might be Santa.
Well, yeah. Well, that outfit is used at other times. Yeah, not at that. I don't want to scare the kids. Yeah. Right on, man.
On the fire department, my deputy chief many years ago was a very slight, very shorter fellow, and very thin, and just a lovely man. And he would dress up as an elf, and he was the hit. There was times like he was just so much appreciated by the kids. So you had me laughing when you were talking about that.
Well, this year we also had Christmas dinosaur Tyrannosaurus, and the kids couldn't care less about Santa. They were all glommed onto the dinosaur. It was hilarious. Yeah, it was so much fun.
It's all good. It's all good. Cheers.
Yeah, I think everybody's back, so we still have a bit of business to do, so we'll start the Hospital District Board of Directors meeting. I'll call it to order. I'd like to acknowledge that we're conducting this meeting on the City of Digital Territories of the Shuswap and Huipachasset First Nations. Excuse me, and we're grateful for the opportunity to do so. We also have directors calling in from other territories, so I'd also like to acknowledge those nations and express our gratitude and our respect. Notice to attendees and delegates, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. We have an agenda in front of us. Is there any additions from directors? Seeing none, is there any additions from the corporate officer?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Could I motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Director Coots, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Any declarations or conflict of interest? Seeing none, we have minutes from the Board of Directors meeting held on November 13th, 2024. Is there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could a motion that the minutes of the Alberni Clayoquot Regional Hospital District Board of Directors held on November 13th, 2024 be adopted? Moved by Director Coots, second by Director Sparrow. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No petitions, delegations, or presentations. No correspondence for action. Correspondence for information. We have Health Emergency Management BC, First Nations Health Authority, Island Health, Métis Nation, British Columbia. Regarding health impacts of the winter season, information for community health partners and local governments. And Island Health applications for youth resilience grants, a partnership of Island Health and Pacific Public Health Foundation. And Chief Medical Health Officer releases report on increasing harms from psychoactive substances. Does anybody want to talk about any of the correspondence? Dr. Steer.
Yeah, thank you. And I won't go long because tomorrow we have our strategic planning for Island Health. I just wanted to point out the Chief Medical Health Officer's release that report on increasing harms from psychoactive substances. It will be helpful if the board, if they are attending tomorrow, to read that report. There's a lot of ground work that's in there that might help inform some of the conversations that we will have tomorrow in our strategic planning session.
Thank you for that, Director Stair. Anyone else? Get a motion that correspondence A to B be received for information. Moved by Director Johnson, seconded by Director Coots. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is request for decisions and bylaws. Request for decision 2025 to 2029 provisional budget. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. So a provisional budget is a requirement of the Hospital District Act, not for the regional district, just for the hospital district. But recognizing that we are undertaking regional hospital district strategic planning tomorrow, I have just based this provisional budget on the 2025 column of last year's budget. So just looking for the board to adopt this, and then we will have a greater discussion around the financial plan during January to March, the winter months, before we adopt in March of 2025. Thank you.
Any questions for Terry or comments? Director Steer and then Director Siga.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you. And Terry, I just want to, I know this is provisional, but this does not bind us or hold us to anything until we have further discussions.
Correct. It does not bind us to anything.
Director Siga.
Hi, I'm just wondering if the workshop tomorrow is going to be live streamed or not, because I can't come to Port Alberni for that.
Unfortunately, it's not going to be. Any other questions or comments? Would someone like to start reading the motions? Director Roth?
Sure. I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional Hospital District Board of Directors give first reading to the bylaw cited as Alberni Clayoquot Regional Hospital District 2025 to 2029 provisional budget number 138.
Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Sparrow. Any final questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead, Director Roth. Second reading of the bylaw. Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Johnson. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead. Third reading to the bylaw. Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Johnson. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Please go ahead.
And I move to adopt the bylaw.
Moved by Director Ross, second by Director Johnson. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is reports. Banfield Health Center, Director Beckett.
No report at this time. Thank you.
Alberni Quicklot Continuing Care Society, Director Sika.
No report at this time, thanks.
West Coast Native Healthcare Society, Director Cote.
Meeting next week.
Defino General Hospital, West Coast Directors, Director Steer.
Yeah, I'll save my report for tomorrow's strategic planning. It'll all tie into one, so it'll all make sense.
Thank you. Alberni Quicklot Health Network, Director Cote.
Thank you. Looking for recruits. I think that we might even be closed at this point. Tomorrow. Also, looking at the request for proposals or RFPs for the coordinator's position. So that's still open also, or is that closed? Closes Friday. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is West Coast General Hospital. On November 18th, I attended a follow-up meeting from the Healthcare Summit that was held in June. The group met to follow up on critical issues identified at the June meeting. Unfortunately, the group was small due to the extreme weather event and the closure of Highway 4. I would also like to thank Director Cote for braving the weather for also attending the meeting. So the group was small, but we did get some business done and everything's moving forward. We just gave updates on what everyone is supposed to be working on. Any other reports? Director Cote.
Thank you. One of the requests was that we work on our trails, our bike trails. Thinking that that would be a really big benefit draw for doctors and recruitment for our area. So
the group that's doing the bike trails, that Dave gave a presentation to City Council on Monday. So I'm going to email that presentation to Jenny and Michael McGregor and see how we can support the group.
Excellent. I also reached out to the chair or the president of that group for an update. So thank you.
I'll send it to you as well if you would like it. Awesome. Any other reports? Seeing none, I'm going to motion that the Regional Hospital Board of Directors receive reports A to G. Moved by Director Johnson, second by Director Roth. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. No unfinished business, no late business. Any questions online?
No questions received. Thank you.
Get a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Coos, second by Director Boyko. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Could I get a motion to reconvene the meeting? Regular board meeting, moved by Director Sparrow, second by Director Cote. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. I'd like to move that we go in camera to close the meeting to the public as per the Community Charter, sections 19(1)(a), personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district, and 91F, law enforcement, if the board considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. Could I get a seconder, please?
Second.
Second by Director Jack. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried.